Coes yn fwyd y tagan y leio ti Ffogem osgeoli dongan y sioti Tan gŵr
The Guardian of the Seven Slabs. The Caer Thalanis, Heirs of Time. Rebecca Nystrom. Epigraph of the Ancient Prophecy. From the seven slabs the circle was born, and at its center the heart of the world. One for each fallen star, one for each doorway through time. When they are scattered, shadow shall reign. When they are united, the veil will tear. Only the one who remembers the oak's song may raise them without breaking the earth. But if even one falls into the hands of hatred, time will fold in on itself, and there will be no memory, no lineage, no love. The guardian will sleep, the chosen will come, and the world, for a moment, will have its final chance. Summary. A druidic epic of time, lineage, and a love that defies oblivion. For centuries the Caer Thalanis, guardians of forbidden knowledge and heirs to the last druidic bloodline, have protected the secrets of the ancient earth, the 13 sacred volumes and the 7 stone slabs, relics holding the power to bend time and heal the world. But an ancestral betrayal unleashed a devastating war among their own, and one of the last custodians was sealed in deep slumber, lost at the threshold between ages. Talorcan MacRhean, warrior and heir of the Caer Thalanis, awakens in a world stripped of magic, where the trees no longer sing and the earth, Gælia, beats with a wounded pulse. Only one woman can see him. Only she can hear the echo of the ancient call. Aeryn Morwyn, a foreigner from the future, carries her own wound, a life devoid of meaning, a soul without roots. Drawn to an ancient stone circle and a vision she cannot explain, she is pulled into a destiny woven centuries before her birth. Together, they must unravel the fabric of time, and cross the stargates to return to the year 1472, where war looms, the druidic lineage is dying, and the balance of the world hangs by a thread. But the love between a daughter of the future and a son of the ancient earth is not written in the annals of fate. And there are forces that would burn the skies before allowing the final truth to be revealed. Can a love born between worlds heal the heart of a forgotten land and overcome time itself? Prologue. Caer Thalanis, Highlands of Scotland, in the year of our Lord 1472. The fog hung thick over the hills, as if the sky itself had descended to cover with its breath the unspoken secrets of the earth. High on the moor, where ancient stones whispered names no one remembered, a woman stood watching the horizon, her heart torn by a certainty she wished she didn't possess. Selen Blaerwick, marked by loss and isolation, knew all too well the price of vision. The magic rods she'd inherited from her mother, and she from a long line of wise women, never lied. And that morning, as they clattered in her lap beneath the dim light of dawn, they had shown her a dark fate. Talorcan MacRhean, laird of their clan, would wed a woman from another bloodline, and that union, through ways she still couldn't grasp, would steal from her the only thing she had left. Nevin. A young priest, pure of soul and steadfast in faith, Nevin embodied everything Selen no longer was: reason against intuition, Christianity against ancestry, future against ruin. And yet in his face, she saw reflected the deepest love she had ever known. He was her only blood, her last hope. "You can't see the devil in every shadow, mother," he had said only hours earlier. "Talorcan is a good man. You know it as well as I do. Why would you wish him harm?" But Selen wished no harm. What she wished, with the desperation of one clinging to the edge of an abyss, was to stop the fulfillment of a cruel fate. The vision hadn't lied. The arrival of that woman, still unknown, would mark her son's downfall. She had seen him lying on the ground, life slipping from his body like a winter sigh. That night, when silence wrapped the cabin and the monastery bells were nothing but distant echoes, Selen set out. She walked through mists until she found those no one dared name, a band of wandering travelers, keepers of ancient rites who still knew how to speak with time and with shadows. She brought with her an offering, Nevin's illuminated Bible, his most sacred treasure, its margins filled with fervent notes and prayers. She gave it to the druids without a tremble in her voice, as if offering her soul. In return she asked for a spell, a charm of suspension, not death. She didn't want to kill the laird, only to protect her son from the fatal influence drawing near. Under the full moon, beside a lake dark as obsidian, the ritual was performed. The wine was mixed with herbs of forgetting, and offered to Talorcan, who, in a gesture of courtesy and trust, drank it without suspicion. When the laird fell into deep sleep, they carried him to an ancient underground cavern sealed with stone runes, where time would hold no sway over him. The spell, the druids said, could only be broken by an improbable conjunction, sunlight touching the blood of two worlds at once. A foreign blood, one untouched by Talorcan's time, and a beam of dawn. Only then would the laird awaken. That night Selen returned alone to her cabin, her conscience clouded with guilt. She hadn't committed a crime, she told herself, but an act of desperate love. She had protected her son's life. How could God condemn her for that? But even as she said it, the rods remained silent. As if her decision had awakened something deeper, something even love could not command. The forces she had invoked did not forget. And deep in the earth, sealed in silence, Talorcan MacRhean slept. He slept while fate, that sly and tireless creature, wove slowly the threads that would bind centuries, souls and bloodlines. He slept while a woman not yet born was already walking toward him, bringing with her not just his awakening, but the final test of everything he had ever believed. On the Druids and the Forgotten Time. Long before history was written with ink and parchment, there were those who read its signs in the bark of trees and the paths of the stars. In ancient Europe, especially on the islands where the mist seems to hold memory, flourished a people whose existence still pulses beneath the surface of the stones, the Celts. But within that vast cultural mosaic, there was a caste even more singular. They were not kings nor warriors, though they often advised them. They were not gods, though they spoke with them. They were the Druids. The Druids did not form a religion, but a living wisdom. They were healers, judges, chroniclers of sky and earth. Their knowledge was not passed down in writing, but from mouth to mouth, soul to soul, like a secret entrusted to the wind. They knew the language of trees, the cycles of the sun and tides, the correspondences between the invisible and the visible. Their worldview was circular. Time did not move in a straight line but turned like the seasons, repeating itself in sacred variations. The druidic is the spiritual heart of that heritage, the part that spoke with the spirits of the forest, that lit ritual fires on the hills, that believed men do not die but change form. Their sacred places were not temples but oak groves. Their theology was the earth itself. In Scotland, where the mountains still whispered in forgotten dialects, some bloodlines endured. When Rome raised the sacred forests of Gaul, when Christianity covered the islands with stone crosses, certain clans guarded that knowledge. They withdrew deep into the north, beyond the reach of maps. Not with swords but with silence. And in the year 1472, while Europe burned with courtly intrigues, wars of succession and fanaticism, in the hidden valleys of the highlands, a handful of druids still watched over the ancient cycles. By the end of the 15th century, the world had not yet been fully devoured by reason, gunpowder, and imperial dogmas. There were still cracks where the unseen had a voice. The Renaissance was awakening, but it had not yet silenced the old voices. It was a threshold for a lineage of hidden wisdom to survive, before the modern age sealed its fissures. In that year, hidden from the eyes of the world, certain clans kept the druidic flame alive. They were the children of the earth, guardians of a knowledge that sought not power but balance. And one of those bloodlines, passed on through silence and blood, still breathed in the shadow of a man who slept beneath the earth, waiting to be awakened by something stronger than reason, destiny. Chapter 1. Clynmore Hills of Tir, Scotland. March 20th. Present day. The northern air carried with it an ancient scent, as if the Scottish land were exhaling memories from a nobler time. Beneath that sky of slow-moving clouds and hills draped in heather, Aeryn Morwyn walked among strangers with the vague hope of somehow finding herself again. At 25, Aeryn was a young woman of sharp intellect and an uninhabited heart. She had lost her parents in an accident as brutal as it was inexplicable, and since then, her soul had lived suspended in a fog of silence. Physics had offered her certainty, yes, clean equations, truths that obeyed reason like a pendulum to rhythm. But it offered no warmth, no comfort. Her job at the insurance company was nothing more than an endless string of identical days, as grey as the paper in the reports, lacking any purpose beyond simply continuing. That was why, without much thought, she embarked on that 2-week journey through Scotland, not as a tourist but as someone searching for a sign, a seam in the fabric of time. The group she travelled with was made up mostly of kind-hearted elderly people who spoke of family anecdotes, past cruises and aching joints. Aeryn listened with courtesy, but her mind drifted far away, feeding on a silent longing. She didn't crave fleeting adventures or postcard romances. She longed for an honest gaze, a voice that spoke to her with truth. A bond that didn't depend on the body, but on the root. During a stop by Loch Ness, she met Fianna Golden, a woman whose face was etched with years, yet whose presence was serene and eyes alive. In Fianna she found more than company, a quiet kind of wisdom. That woman, simple and wise, spoke to her gently about the chances of love and the dignity of waiting. "It's not about finding just anyone, dear," she said one afternoon over tea and murmurs. "It's about recognizing the one who sees in you what you're only just beginning to suspect." Aeryn kept those words as if they were a key. The Rift. That day, upon learning she wouldn't be able to check into the inn just yet, she decided to leave the group and climb the hills alone. She longed for silence, for height, for contact with something older than sorrow. The landscape held a sober beauty, centuries-old hawthorns, deer darting through ferns, and the lake stretched out like a sheet of mercury beneath the clear sky. There, amid the song of the wind and the whisper of trees, Aeryn felt a painful truth: she was alone, and she could no longer pretend otherwise. In a careless moment, her backpack slipped down a steep crevice. Without hesitation, she descended to retrieve it, ignoring the discomfort of her clothes and the relentless sun. That pack held the essentials, not just her belongings, but a fragile sense of control over her inner chaos. But when she finally reached it, the ground gave way beneath her feet. And she fell. There was no scream. Only darkness and a dull, jarring impact. She woke wrapped in shadow, her ears ringing and her body numb. The air was damp, earthy. For a moment she thought she lay on stone, but the warmth beneath her chest made her jolt upright. It wasn't rock, it was a human body. She held her breath. The man lay motionless, but his chest rose steadily. He was alive. Aeryn, still dazed, examined him with a mix of fear and fascination. He was tall, with defined muscles and a solemn face as if carved from ancient marble. His skin was covered in spiral tattoos, markings that seemed to pulse with their own light and that before her eyes began to fade like ink dissolving in water. She didn't know if she had woken in a dream or a delirium. Suddenly, he opened his eyes. His gaze struck her with a force that froze her blood. They were light blue, ancient, as if they held extinguished constellations. He didn't speak at first. He simply looked at her, with the gravity of someone witnessing a prophecy. When he moved, he did so with complete control. With one swift motion he restrained her, not aggressively, but with undeniable authority. Aeryn, far from submitting, straightened as much as she could and haltingly told her story: a fall, a crevice, a solitary walk. She wasn't there to cause harm, or to understand the inexplicable. She just wanted to leave. He listened in silence, still holding her, his brow furrowed with some ancient suspicion. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep, with an accent that belonged to no place she knew. His words were archaic, his speech heavy with another era. He asked if she was a witch. If magic had brought her there. Aeryn, wounded in her dignity and still vulnerable, met his gaze and shook her head with resolve. She was no sorceress, no messenger, no offering. She was a woman, alone, lost. And she demanded respect. Something in her words disarmed him. Slowly he let her go. The contact dissolved, but the tension lingered, like static that refused to fade. They remained silent, facing each other, not fully understanding. Aeryn noticed how his eyes moved over her figure, struggling to comprehend what they saw. Her clothes, her way of speaking, everything about her must have seemed an offense to some forgotten law. He, on the other hand, seemed like a living relic, a figure lifted from myth, caught in time. She still didn't know his name, nor what age he came from, but something about him, his posture, his skin marked by symbols now vanished, suggested a deeper origin than any era. What had begun as a journey of escape was now becoming the threshold of something unfathomable. Beneath the earth, at the root of an unknown mountain, Aeryn felt she had crossed an invisible border. And on the other side, a fate awaited her that she had never known how to imagine. I loved you in another time. Talorcan MacRhean, leader of his clan and descendant of an ancient line of druid sages, awoke with a restlessness he couldn't quite place. Though his surroundings offered no clear sign of danger, there was something about the young Englishwoman, her way of speaking, her strange clothes, her unfiltered boldness that hinted at a deeper mystery. He couldn't recall how he had come to the cave where he'd found her. He should have been on his way home. His memory was fragmented, a lake, strange voices, incense, and then nothing. Talorcan suspected he'd been drugged and taken, a grave offense not only against him but against his clan. His instincts warned him someone had tried to hide him. As he tried to piece together what had happened, his mind returned to his home and the duty that awaited him, the responsibility of continuing the MacRhean legacy after the death of his brother Caelan, and the urgent need to secure an heir. The woman, Aeryn Morwyn, seemed more fragile than her demeanor suggested. Despite her outward levity, Talorcan sensed the weight she carried, the loss of her parents and the armor she'd built from pain. She was wary and defiant, but he, with his experience and authority, treated her with a mix of patience, firmness, and respect. Do you swear you had nothing to do with my being here? Aeryn raised her hands in a gesture that said more than any words. Look at me, really look, see how small and harmless I am, and then look at yourself. He nodded, granting her the point with solemnity. No, you couldn't have done much, he said, a shadow of regret in his voice. She didn't bother to reply. When he stood fully, Aeryn was surprised to see he wore nothing resembling modern clothing. Not pants or normal attire, but rough cloth tied at the waist, and leather boots covering his feet and calves. His presence was imposing. Looking up at him, she couldn't help but mutter, "How tall are you?" He didn't take it as flattery or mockery. "Taller than the great hall's chimney," he answered with a distant expression, as if the comparison held symbolic value. He mentioned someone named Caelan, a flicker of melancholy in his voice. They'd competed to grow taller than a stone structure. "I'm taller than my father," he added, like someone listing an inherited legacy with reverence. Trying to keep the conversation practical, she clarified. "I meant your actual height. Standing." He paused briefly as if calculating. "Around 6.5 feet, he concluded. "For a woman like you, just over 5. I suppose it could be intimidating." She grabbed her backpack with determination. "Let's go." "Wait. I'm not ready to leave yet," he said calmly. He stepped into a corner of the cave, and began to dress in what Aeryn recognized as ancient armor. Leather straps crossed over his chest in an X, fitted precisely, protecting vital areas with metal discs. A dark cloak rested on one shoulder, and a pouch tied at his waist completed the outfit. Aeryn watched stunned. He looked like he'd stepped out of another century. He secured his forearms with more leather bands, then began placing knives with practiced movements, one at each wrist, more at his chest and back. Finally he picked up a double-bladed axe and a sword, fastening them with care. He clearly knew how to fight. "Are those real?" Aeryn asked, her voice barely a whisper. He looked at her seriously, without arrogance. "Yes. Otherwise they'd be useless for protecting life." She repeated under her breath, as if trying to convince herself. "To kill a man." He didn't answer right away. He looked up at the cave ceiling, thoughtful. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "I could throw you up there, if I wanted to." Aeryn looked at him coolly. No thanks. I'm not a bore. He smiled amused. I'd probably bring more stones down on us. Better we find another exit. You don't remember how you got in here? No. I don't even remember why, he answered, troubled. That answer unsettled Aeryn. How could he not remember, if he'd entered with his things neatly arranged? You need to get dressed, he said bluntly. She tensed. I am dressed. He raised an eyebrow, then shrugged without pressing the issue. As you wish. If you're comfortable like that. Taking her by the arm, he led her through a passage. As soon as they left the cave, total darkness surrounded them. They moved blindly, him feeling along the wall and guiding her steadily. Do you know these caves? Aeryn asked, overwhelmed by the darkness. No. And if you're telling the truth, neither do you. Got a better idea? Yes, she said with resolve. But I need you to stop for a moment. Got fire? Because that's what we need. There was a mocking edge in his tone that irritated her. Aeryn felt underestimated. Yes, I do, she snapped back. He stopped abruptly and she bumped into his back. She felt the solidness of him, his strong scent. His large hands rested on her shoulders with assurance. Where's that fire? He murmured, searching blindly. His hand moved through her hair, her face, almost brushing her lips. Finally he touched her back and pulled her close in a swift motion. Ah, here it is, he whispered, voice low and teasing. I'm sure you have fire, but that one won't help us get out of here. Aeryn pulled away sharply. You're insufferable. Have all those muscles atrophied your brain? He was quiet for a few seconds. I don't understand what you mean. Forget it. Just let me get something from my backpack. She handed him the bag and searched until she found a silver lighter. When she flicked it, a flame sparked and he jumped back, startled. You have fire? A lighter. But I don't smoke, she added, anticipating judgment. He took the lighter without asking, and Aeryn had the distinct impression that this was how he took everything he wanted. It took him a moment to figure it out, like he'd never seen one before. When he finally lit it, the faint glow revealed his face, serious and focused. Aeryn followed him in silence, with no choice but to trust him. Englishwoman, he said suddenly gently. Why do you call me that? You haven't told me your name. And I don't call you Scott, do I? She shot back, irritated. He gave a quiet, almost sad laugh. Englishwoman? What month is it? Aeryn felt a chill run down her spine. Oh no. This is beyond strange. Upon discovering a possible way out of the cave, Talorcan relied on his physical strength, rather than the druidic magic that would have revealed him. He didn't want to frighten the girl with a display of power that others had once feared. He preferred to be known as a man, not a myth. Aeryn, for her part, kept her distance with sharp instinct. Though Talorcan was an imposing man, and she couldn't help a certain pull toward him, she had no intention of yielding easily. He, however, was no brute. He watched with respect, weighed his actions and chose not to force anything. He valued free will over submission. They both knew their encounter was far from ordinary. Aeryn claimed to be on vacation, alone, without clan or escort, which to Talorcan sounded unimaginable, shaped as he was by another time and culture. She was a riddle, as out of place here as he felt within himself. As they moved closer to the exit, Talorcan quietly reaffirmed his resolve to protect her. Not only because she was vulnerable in a world she clearly didn't understand, but because, against all reason, something in her sparked an unexpected hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, he wasn't meant to carry on his legacy alone. Chapter 2. When the Earth remembers you. Although Aeryn wasn't a woman inclined to violence, she was surprised by the fierce impulse to slap Talorcan MacRhean. It wasn't just the urge to reply with sharp, cutting words, as would have been mature and reasonable, but a visceral need to shove him, hit him, even bite him if he touched her again with that inexplicable sense of authority. Just looking at him was enough to make her lose her composure. She had never met a man so stubbornly patriarchal. He brought out the worst in her, dragging her down to a level as primitive as his own. Talorcan acted as if, by finding her lying on top of him, he somehow had a claim over her. Clearly Scottish lairds hadn't changed much over the centuries. He had mentioned with arrogant pride that he was a true landowner, as if expecting her to collapse into a curtsy or a virginal faint. But Aeryn had no intention of feeding his ego. To her he was the archetype of a Don Juan, charming, muscular, and dangerously seductive. But surely, with so much strength in his arms, there couldn't be much room left in his head.
"I need to get back to the inn," she announced coldly.
"There's no need to seek refuge in a common lodge," he replied with calm assurance. "You'll be well received on my lands. I'll see to your needs." As he spoke, he ran his hand possessively along the back of her neck, his fingers threading into her hair. "You wear your hair in a peculiar way," he added, almost with delight. "Strange but sensual." She pulled away, irritated, brushing her fringe out of her eyes with a sharp gesture.
"Let's get one thing straight, MacRhean.
I'm not going anywhere with you, I won't share your bed, and I won't waste another second arguing with you. I promise not to take offense when you change your mind, girl. Contrary to what you think, arrogance is not an aphrodisiac to me," she lied. It wasn't. Except with this man in particular, who seemed to be desire incarnate. She'd been resisting the urge to taste him with her mouth, and every second made it harder. "Aphrodisiac," he repeated, frowning slightly as if savoring the word. "From the Greek, Aphrodite and Arkosh, a love potion?" "Something like that," she muttered, thrown off by his knowledge of etymology. Why was he speaking Greek? He smiled with unmasked arrogance that made her lower her gaze, suddenly very interested in her fingernails. The man was simply too sensual for her inner peace. Then, with a gentleness that contrasted his intensity, he touched her again. He tugged softly at her hair, forcing her to look at him. His light blue eyes glinted like a wolf's under the moon. "Tell me you don't feel this fire between us. Say it, Aeryn Morwyn." She felt that he could sense what her body was screaming without permission. She wanted him. And though the sensible thing was to deny it, her lie was weak. "I don't want you." A trembling answer to a desire that grew like a silent blaze. Talorcan tilted his head, amused. A barely there smile tugged at his lips. "When you tell the truth, Englishwoman, your words alone will turn me to stone." She didn't dare tell him he already was. She'd felt it when she touched him. And though she didn't want to admit it, she was seriously considering the possibility of a night of passion with a stranger. She wanted it. She wanted to feel something real, physical, overwhelming. But he was too dangerous. Too beautiful. Too uncertain. Even though she'd resolved to change her life and leave her innocence behind, she now understood it wouldn't be as easy as she had imagined. It wasn't just about desire, it was about facing the unknown, passion, surrender, and the chaos that this man embodied. Talorcan began descending the hillside, and she followed, determined to keep her distance.
"You don't have to hold my hand," Aeryn protested.
He simply smiled. "I like holding your hand.
But you can walk beside me."
"And I won't walk anywhere else," she replied dryly. Walking behind him would mean submission. Ahead, recklessness. Beside him, the only sensible choice. He walked with long, confident strides, and though she struggled to keep pace, she didn't complain. The sooner they reached the inn, the sooner she could put distance between them.
But when she turned, she realized he had stopped.
Aeryn turned back impatiently, but Talorcan didn't answer. He stood still, staring at something in the valley. "Are we going?" she shouted. "Nothing." She waved her arms. Still nothing. She took advantage of his distraction to run. She darted down the hill, feeling a little ridiculous. She knew that if he had meant to harm her, he would have done it already.
But there was something about him.
Something not entirely human, and that unsettled her. Then in the next instant, she was slammed to the ground. She found herself pinned under the weight of his body.
I told you not to run from me, he murmured. You froze, she panted.
I called you. And now I'm bruised all over. He didn't answer. His breath was labored, and his hands trembled over hers. What is it? She asked, suddenly worried. Talorcan was staring intently at a road in the distance. A truck glinted in the sunlight.
What is that?
A truck? Aeryn blinked. Maybe a Volkswagen. Hard to tell with the glare. A what? Volkswagen. A car. He tilted his head.
What kind of wanderer?
She exhaled sharply. A car. People use them to get around. He remained silent, then asked in a low voice. Englishwoman? American, she corrected him.
What century is this?
Aeryn's heart skipped a beat. Was he joking? Or 21st century, she answered cautiously. He looked again at the landscape, the cars, the lights, the buildings, the poles, the wires strung between trees. He inhaled deeply. Then he murmured with resignation. By the old gods. I haven't lost a moon. I've lost centuries. Aeryn stared at him in disbelief. He studied her clothes, her backpack, her boots, and when he reached her socks he read aloud.
You name your stockings.
He ran a finger over the stitched polo sport, then turned his gaze to the label on her boots, Jim Green. And in that moment, she knew without a doubt that he wasn't just any man. He was something more. A remnant of the past, or a shadow born of myth. Aeryn sighed in resignation, and began to hand him the small bag, then opened the main zipper of her backpack, without the slightest interest in explaining how zippers worked. If the man truly didn't understand fasteners, she wasn't about to teach him. Let women sew locks into their clothing if they wished. She had no energy left for sarcasm. He took the backpack roughly, and dumped its contents onto the damp grass. Her phone rolled away, and Aeryn felt a stab of frustration at herself for not having left it behind. Then again, there was no signal here anyway. But as she watched the device crumble under his hands, its casing finally shattered after so many falls, she knew it would never turn on again. He studied the tiny technological pieces with fascination, as if they were remnants of an incomprehensible spell. He rummaged through her belongings with confusion, examined the items in her toiletry bag with curiosity, opened her makeup case, and looked into the small mirror, studying his own face as if trying to decipher it. The protein bars were set aside next to a box of condoms, which he ignored completely. When he discovered her toothbrush, his gaze shifted from the object to Aeryn's thick mane of hair with a strange look, one brow raised in skepticism. He picked up a glossy magazine, flipping through it with a mix of astonishment and bewilderment, pausing at the images of half-naked models and garish colors. He ran his fingers over the pages, as if doubting they were real. And Shannon believes his illuminated grimoires are treasures, he muttered with an incredulous smile. When he started going through her underwear, Aeryn decided she had had enough. She firmly placed her hand over the piece of lime green silk he was holding and shook her head, ready to end the absurd inspection.
But when he looked at her, for the first time since they had met, the seduction was gone.
In its place was something deeper, anguish. And suddenly, she wasn't so sure he was pretending. If it was an act, he was a masterful performer. She snatched the magazine from his hands, and pointed to the date printed in the corner. His eyes widened visibly.
What century did you think you were in?
Aeryn asked, feeling ridiculous for letting herself be fooled by someone so baffling. None of it made sense, but this man drew her in like a moth to a flame, and she knew she could easily get burned. The 16th century, he answered in a hollow voice. He said it with such dismay that without thinking, Aeryn touched him, resting her fingers against his sculpted jaw. She stayed like that longer than necessary, caught by something she couldn't name. MacRhean, you need help, she murmured gently.
Let's find it together.
He closed his hand over hers and lifting his head, kissed her palm with solemnity. Thank you. Your compassion honors me. Aeryn pulled her hand back abruptly, trembling slightly.
Come with me to town.
We'll find a doctor there. Maybe you took a fall, you could have a concussion. She wanted to believe that. It was easier than accepting that this man, so imposing, so composed, so out of time, might be telling the truth. No, he said softly, his eyes fixed on the date. We won't go to your town. We must reach Brathren. Time is short. The journey will be hard, but you will be well rewarded for your help. Holy God, she thought, did he really intend to take her to his castle? I'm not following you to those stones, she said as calmly as she could.
Let me help you properly.
Trust me. You trust me, he replied, lifting her with ease. I need you, Aeryn. Your help matters more than you know.
And I'm trying to give it to you. But you don't understand.
I know you're sick. He shook his head. In the fading light, his spring lake eyes gleamed clear and intelligent, no trace of madness, only a calm resolve. I'm not mad. You'll see for yourself. Come with me. I beg you. I won't go with you, she said firmly.
I have other things to do.
You must forget them. The duty of Caer Thalanis takes precedence. In time you'll understand. Now I ask you one last time, will you come of your own will? Only if hell freezes over first, she answered coldly. That's when she noticed he had pulled a chain from some hidden place while they argued. Before she could react, he snapped the shackles around her wrist. Aeryn opened her mouth to scream, but he covered it with a strong, steady hand. Then you'll come with me by my will. So it is written. Chapter 3. Castle of Caer Thalanis. The druidic in Talorcan was like a soul inhabiting a body. It was the secret glow at the heart of that voice whispering through the trees, of that flame burning atop the hills under ritual moons, of the certainty that death was not an end but merely a metamorphosis. It was the land itself, with its living oak groves, sanctuaries breathing among leaves and moss, with its pulse of seasons and language of wind. Almost 500 years, Talorcan thought in awe. How could it be possible? It felt as if only yesterday, he had ridden through the heather-covered meadows of his highland home. Yet his instincts did not lie, he knew it with a visceral certainty that could not be denied. The time in which Aeryn lived was different, altered, as if the natural balance of the elements had been broken. This was not a healthy world. He didn't understand how the centuries had passed. Trying to explore his memory brought no clarity. It was as if the slumber of 500 years had dulled his recollection, clouding the moments before his disappearance. Only vague fragments remained, an ambush, armed men, ceremonial chants, and thick smoke filled with an ancient scent, something like sorcery or druidic ritual.
Was I drugged, he asked himself.
Or the victim of a sleep spell? And if he had been enchanted, by whom and why? Knowing that could reveal whether his clan had also fallen to the same fate. A chill crept down his spine at the thought that someone might have attacked them, because of the tradition they protected. For the men of Caer Thalanis were druids, direct descendants of an ancient line that, unlike many, had not lost the true knowledge. Through millennia, they had safeguarded pure, unbroken wisdom, and they were the sole guardians of the sacred stones. If his father Shannon had been killed after his capture, all that sacred legacy would have vanished, just when the world might need it most. His eyes sought Aeryn. If not for her, he might have slept for all eternity. He whispered a silent thank you. For now, the causes and the culprits didn't matter. What mattered was the present. He had awakened. He had the chance and the duty to set things right.
But for that, he had to reach Brathren before midnight on Ostara.
He looked at her again. She was avoiding his gaze. Twilight had fallen, and they had traveled far, leaving behind the deafening noise of that strange world. In the moonlight, Aeryn's skin glowed like warm pearl. Talorcan studied her for a moment, not without desire, but held himself back. Not because he didn't want her, the pull was fierce, but because his need for her went beyond the body. She was his link to this new time, his only ally in an incomprehensible world. From the moment he saw her, he had fought to contain his desire. But he was even more intrigued by her spirit, When he told her he would carry her if necessary, she didn't scream, didn't faint, didn't beg. She ignored him with dignity. She had spoken with logic, appealing to his reason to let her go. When she realized he wouldn't change his mind, she treated him as if he didn't exist. A silent strength, he thought. Intelligent, strong-willed. At first he thought Aeryn was a woman marked by tragedy, perhaps the sole survivor of an attack on her clan. Her clothing, her attitude, everything seemed strange. But over time, he understood that she might simply be a daughter of her era. Perhaps women had changed more than he had imagined, now they were independent, bold. And yet, why did he sense a quiet sadness in her, a delicate vulnerability? Aeryn believed he kept her close out of desire, and though that desire was real, deeper things were at stake. He needed to reach the stones. If the worst were true and his castle was gone, there was an ancient ritual that could only be completed with someone by his side, someone like Aeryn Morwyn. She was exhausted. When she stumbled and fell against him, only to pull herself up stubbornly, he knew he had to let her rest. He lifted her gently in his arms, and laid her down on the moss-covered trunk of a fallen tree. Sitting there, feet dangling, she looked fragile. He remembered that warrior hearts didn't always come in strong bodies. He sat beside her. "Aeryn," he said softly. There was no answer. "I won't hurt you. I swear it." "You already did," she replied coldly. "You're speaking to me again?" "I'm chained to you. I had decided to ignore you completely, but I've changed my mind. I think it'll be more fun to torture you with complaints and make you wish you'd been born deaf." He laughed. Her sharp English wit amused him. "You have every right. I regret what I've done to you. But I had no choice." "Let me get this straight," she said, raising a brow. "You say you're from the 16th century? From the year 1472. And you lived nearby?" "Yes." "You were a lord?" "I am." "And how did you end up asleep in a cave until the 21st century?" "That's what I have to find out." "MacRhean, that's impossible. You seem sane, except for that absurd fantasy. No one sleeps for 5 centuries. That only happens in fairy tales." "I don't believe they're fairy tales. Perhaps it was magic, or the Tir Neraith." "The what?" "The ancients. The fair folk, how do you call them now? But they're real, even if they keep away from the world of mortals. In Scotland we've always known this." She sighed, exasperated, and changed the subject. "Why do you need to go to Brathren? And why bring me along?" Talorcan weighed his words. "I must reach the stones. My castle was there." "Was?" "I hope it still is." She looked at him skeptically. "And what do you expect to find? Your descendants?" No. His father had likely had no other children. All he hoped for was a sign of his bloodline, or at least some remnant of the castle. "And why do you need me?" "I don't know this century. It could be dangerous. I need someone to guide me. And if you're wrong, and all of this is just a hallucination?" "Have I hurt you?" he asked, lifting her face to him. "Do you really believe I would hurt you?" She looked away, uncomfortable. "What unsettles me are the chains." He made a decision. With a firm motion, he unfastened them. "Then you're free. I thought you were a strong and compassionate woman, not a coward who can't face what she doesn't understand." "I'm not a coward." "You cling to a narrow view of the world, Aeryn. If something doesn't fit your logic, you reject it. Isn't that a kind of fear?" She turned on him, furious. She sat astride the log, determined to refute him. "How dare you question my view of the world? I assure you it's broad and well-informed. I just don't believe in fairy tales or sleeping druids." "You're contradictory," he said gently. "Sometimes I see great courage in you, and other times only fear. Have you always been like this?" In the blood of dawn. A hand rose and brushed her throat gently, and her eyes widened in surprise. He had touched a vulnerable spot. Still, he continued with calm determination. Is it too much to ask that you offer some of your time to someone in need? Not in the way you think they should be helped, but in the way they truly need it. You say that like this is all my fault, like I'm the crazy one, she snapped. If what I'm saying is true, and I swear it is, then I think you're the irrational one, he replied calmly. Have you considered that your world feels just as alien to me as mine does to you? A world without roots, with mutilated trees and leaves of steel, people dressed in soulless clothes and empty words. Doubt flickered across Aeryn's face, so expressive and transparent. Her stormy eyes widened even more, and Talorcan glimpsed beneath her armor a flash of vulnerability. It pained him to press her, but she didn't understand how crucial all of this was, and perhaps never would. There was no time to find someone else, nor did he want to. He wanted her. She had awakened him from a long inner slumber. His conviction that Aeryn was meant to help him grew stronger with each passing day. He recalled his druid father's words, "There are no coincidences in this world, Talorcan. Look with the eye of the eagle. The pattern is there, even if you can't see it yet." Aeryn rubbed her temples with a weary gesture. You're giving me a headache, she murmured, then sighed with resignation. Fine. I give up. Why don't you tell me who you think you are? It wasn't an enthusiastic acceptance, but he took it as a small victory. He hadn't realized how tense he'd been, until he felt his muscles relax beneath his skin. I told you, I'm the laird of my clan, though my father still lives. Shannon gave up the title. After 62 winters, I can't blame him. Carrying the weight of a clan for so long wears down the spirit. I had a brother, Caer, he died recently. He didn't add that his betrothed had also been killed on that fateful journey with Caer. Some memories hurt too much.
How did it happen? She asked softly.
He was returning from MacLear lands, when he got caught in a battle between the Keldryth and the Dramer. It wasn't even our affair, but Caer couldn't stand by in the face of injustice. He was struck down trying to help. I'm truly sorry, she said gently. He stepped down from the fallen log and approached. Aeryn didn't retreat. Being at her eye level seemed to make her feel more at ease.
That was Caer, he said with a mix of pride and grief.
Always the first to defend the weak. A sword went through his heart. I found him at dawn tied to his horse's back, escorted by MacLear guards. And I felt I had failed him and our father. Your mother? She asked delicately.
She died when I was 15.
Neither she nor the child she carried survived. My father never remarried. He swore there would only be one true love for him, he smiled wistfully. His love was heaven-sent, a druid and the daughter of an eccentric inventor, a woman educated in a world that rarely teaches its daughters. Shannon had been lucky. Talorcan not so much. Are you married?
No, he said firmly.
I wouldn't have tried to kiss you if I were. A point in favor of men, Aeryn quipped.
But, aren't you a bit old not to be married yet?
I was betrothed, he replied, avoiding details. His record didn't speak well for him.
And what happened to her?
She died before the wedding. She went quiet, then said softly, I'm very sorry. A few moments passed in silence. Do you want to get married? She finally asked. He raised an eyebrow, amused. Are you proposing, lass? She blushed. Of course not. I'm just trying to understand what kind of man you are.
Yes, I want to marry and build a family, he said with a warm smile.
But only with a good woman. And what's a good woman to you? She asked, raising a hand to stop him. Let me guess, obedient, loyal, not too clever, and of course the fairest in the land. He shook his head calmly. To me, a good woman isn't good because of her beauty, but because of what her features mean to me. Maybe she has a dimple when she smiles, or a witch's mark on her cheek. But beyond her face, she'd be someone curious, who loves to learn, who adores children with all her soul. She'd be brave, compassionate, and able to see beauty in me and in the world we'd build together. His voice grew deeper, full of emotion. She'd be my confidant, in the quietest hours of the night. She'd walk by my side through the weather and landscapes of the Highlands. She'd be my partner, my lover, my beloved wife. Aeryn inhaled sharply. Her skepticism faltered for a moment. She shifted uncomfortably and looked away. Then, in a measured tone, she changed the subject. If you're a 16th century Scot, why don't you speak Gaelic? He smiled. You want Gaelic, he whispered, and then in his ancestral tongue, followed by Latin, and then an even older language, he murmured what he would do to her if he were granted the right to love her without restraint. She shivered. Not because of the words, but because of what they held.
That could all be made up, she said, her voice trembling. Then why did you test me? He asked softly.
Because I need proof. I can't follow you blindly. And you're right to demand it, he nodded. You don't seem like someone who trusts easily. You have proof of my world, she said, pointing at his clothes, his sword.
But that could be a costume. What would you consider real proof?
I don't know, she admitted. I can show you at the stones, he said at last. Beyond any doubt.
How?
You must see it with your own eyes. She studied him in silence. Do you think your ancestors might have any record of you? A portrait? Aeryn, you need to decide whether you think I'm mad or telling the truth. I can't prove it to you until we reach Brathren. If once we get there, after I've shown you all I can, you still don't believe me, then I won't ask anything else of you. What do you have to lose, Aeryn Morwyn? Is your life so full you can't spare a few days for someone who needs them? She hesitated. Then nodded slowly. I'll go with you to your stones. I want to see if you can prove what you say. But if in the end I'm not convinced, our story ends there. Understood? Okay. Do you agree to that deal? Will you honor it? He bowed his head solemnly. By my word as Caer Thalanis. I will. Aeryn stopped in front of Talorcan, determination flickering in her eyes. I'll know. When you show me the proof, if I still don't believe you, then you can be free of me.
But you must promise you'll stay with me.
Until I see it with my own eyes, she declared. A chill ran down Talorcan's spine. The way she used language unsettled him. There was ambiguity in her words, a dangerous elasticity he couldn't control. I accept. But you won't chain me, and I need to eat and take care of myself. I'm going down that path in the woods, and if you follow me you'll do me a great, great harm, Aeryn added, leaping nimbly from the fallen log and circling him with a defiant air. As you wish, Aeryn Morwyn, he replied, his voice deep and calm. She crouched to grab her backpack, but Talorcan was quicker. He gripped her wrist firmly. No. If you leave, this stays with me. I need a few things, she murmured, trying to hide her discomfort. You can take one item, he allowed, uneasy at the thought he might be interfering with some female necessity he didn't understand. Frowning, Aeryn rummaged through her bag and pulled out an energy bar and a small pouch. With a defiant gesture, she slipped the bar into the pouch and said, See? One item. Then turning sharply, she disappeared into the trees. I'm sorry, lass, Talorcan murmured once she was out of earshot. He had no choice. She had become an unwilling victim of a fate greater than either of them. Aeryn slipped into the thicket, used the natural facilities quickly, always glancing around, uneasy. It didn't seem like he had followed her. Still, she trusted nothing. After relieving herself, she devoured the energy bar with hunger. A dab of minty toothpaste on her tongue revived her with its sharp flavor. The simple touch of the cosmetic nicotine patch on her nose and cheeks brought an almost ridiculous pleasure. Sweaty, exhausted, and yet more alive than she had ever felt. For the first time, she began to question her own skepticism. There was a part of her, ancient, quiet, long ignored, that longed to believe. In magic. In enchantments. In men who could make her knees tremble with a single glance. And in the possibility that the world might be bigger than science could explain. For years she'd wrestled with one essential question, Who was she really? Merely the product of her scientific upbringing. At 25, she suffered from a deep inability to be intimate. She longed for something unnamed and feared it just as much. Was she cold by nature like her parents? She remembered asking her father as a child what love was. An illusion, he'd said. A chemical mechanism to justify a change in civil status. Choose your partner by IQ, ambition, and resources. Better yet, let us choose for you. And for a time she had. She dated the men her parents approved of, brilliant yes but dry, men who evaluated her like an equation to be solved. What they seemed to want most was the prestige of her name, and her parents' influence. By 21, she was a fully fledged cynic. By 23, she dropped out of her PhD program, creating a permanent rift with her family. By 25 she felt like an island. Alone. Disconnected from everything. 2 years ago she tried to reinvent herself, took a simple job with ordinary people, far from the academic elite.
But she quickly realized it wasn't her career that was the problem, it was something deeper.
Something inside her. Though she told herself she'd come to Scotland to lose her virginity, the truth was more fragile. She'd come to find something. To know if love was real or not. She needed to feel. Desperately. And when Talorcan spoke, so passionately, with a clarity she had never heard in another man, about what he sought in a woman, Aeryn had nearly thrown herself into his arms. He wanted a family. Shared conversations. Beloved children. Loyalty. A man who would never kiss another, if he were committed. Talorcan, she thought, was an island too. In truth, she had come to Scotland searching for magic. Not spells but soul. To find out if she had a heart, if she could still be moved. To break the mold she'd been cast in. And now here she was, in the middle of a Scottish forest, running from a man who claimed to have travelled through time. And for the first time, she was ready to stop controlling every part of her life. To follow instinct, impulse. To trust, as impossible as it seemed, in a beautiful madman who maybe wasn't so mad after all. Maybe, she thought with a trembling smile, this was exactly what she needed. Chapter 4. At the hour of dew, when the alder dreams, and the moss keeps secrets of stone. I saw you arrive without a name, without a shield. Your heart open like the Beltane sky. When Aeryn returned to the clearing, the dim firelight flickered over the masculine contours of Talorcan, who had kept busy during her absence. He had fashioned a makeshift bed using his own clothes, carefully laid out over the ground covered in dry leaves. Though the gesture was practical, she couldn't help but notice something that unsettled her. Among the clothes was a garment she had never worn, a symbolic and impulsive purchase. A delicate bold burgundy lingerie set embroidered with velvet. Her eyes settled on him, suspicious. Had he placed it there on purpose? If so, his face gave nothing away, it remained calm, almost innocent in expression. I couldn't find food tonight, he said apologetically, but at dawn we'll find something. For now, you need to rest. She didn't reply, though her expression said enough. She looked with annoyance at her clothes scattered among branches and dirt. Talorcan, meanwhile, stayed in silhouette, outlined by the fire, keeping his features partially hidden. Only the relaxed, almost sensual way he tossed back his dark hair was visible, every movement wrapped in a natural wild grace that evoked the bloodline of ancient Highland warriors. I made you a bed, he added with a half-smile. In my time I would have laid out my plaid for you, and warmed you with my body. Shall I lay it out?
That's not necessary, Aeryn replied quickly, almost stumbling over her words.
My clothes are fine. Perfect. She was exhausted. The day had demanded more from her body and mind than weeks of her ordinary life ever had. The fire's warmth and the makeshift bed pulled at her like a spell. And you, she asked warily.
Aren't you going to sleep?
I've slept for centuries, he said in a low, almost grave voice. And I'm not ready to close my eyes again. I'll keep watch. She hesitated a moment, but stayed where she was. I could help you relax, Talorcan offered gently. I've been told my hands are soothing. I could rub your back, stroke your hair. Don't even think about it, she cut him off sharply, her voice ice cold. A flicker of humor passed briefly across his face. He didn't insist. Remember, I offered. Now sleep. Tomorrow we cover a lot of ground. I could carry you, but I suspect you wouldn't appreciate it. Damn right, MacRhean, she muttered, collapsing awkwardly beside the fire. She folded a shirt beneath her head and closed her eyes with heaviness. Are you cold? He asked in the darkness, his voice barely a whisper. I'm perfectly fine, Aeryn lied, feeling the night air brush against her skin. And yet, she only shivered slightly before curling a little closer to the fire's warmth. Soon she fell into a deep dreamless sleep, as though the forces around her, or perhaps something older, something sacred, had laid a blanket of rest over her. Talorcan watched Aeryn Morwyn sleep in silence. The flickering firelight caressed her blonde hair, where golden and ashen strands wove together like filaments of moonlight and shadow. She slept on her side, her face serene, and her lips soft and natural in color, curved with an unconscious femininity. But it wasn't her appearance that truly moved him. She was different. Singular. A creature forged from an uncommon alloy of courage and caution. There was intelligence in her gaze, and in her bearing, a resolve that did not hesitate to challenge him, even against the vastness of the unknown. She was small, yes, but she carried a dignity that didn't need stature. Talorcan sensed that her bravery was innate, while her wariness was a learned armor. And that boldness would serve her well. Because the trials ahead would be many. The warrior closed his eyes for a moment, and sifted through the scattered fragments of his memory. He would have a day or two to reassemble his thoughts, and prepare the ritual that would allow him to fulfill his oath. He had to remember every gesture, every word, every symbol with precision. Even the slightest mistake could be fatal. A sigh escaped his lips as he turned toward the dark night that surrounded him. This century disturbed him. Its pulse was artificial, its sounds foreign. The constant hum in the air and the distant rumble of a sky that seemed at war spoke to him of a world he neither understood nor wished to. He shut his eyes and tried to gather his thoughts. His druidic training had been rigorous, but nothing had prepared him to perform the ritual away from Caer Thalanis castle, without access to the sacred stones or the codices of his lineage. The risk was immense. Many believed that druidism had died, that the ancient sages had vanished, leaving behind only fragments, clumsy apprentices, and harmless spells. But that was a carefully cultivated lie, crafted by the true druids. Illusion had always been their greatest tool. The truth was more complex. Druidic art not only survived, it had thrived in shadow. After the departure of the Tir Neraith, the ancient gods of his people, the druids, mortal and limited, had fought among themselves to preserve the knowledge. That war had nearly destroyed the world. To prevent history from repeating itself, one single bloodline had been chosen to guard the most sacred, the Caer Thalanis. Since then their duty had been clear: to heal, to teach, to protect. A penance for the mistakes of the past. 13 sacred volumes and 7 stone slabs held the most dangerous secrets of the ancient lore: sacred geometry, star maps, the art of folding time. And that was what he needed to do. At Brathrin, the bridge of the revealed secret, an ancient stone structure suspended at the crossroads of the world, he had to perform a rite that demanded unyielding precision. Only on equinoxes and solstices did the threshold open. Only a Caer Thalanis could cross it. At Brathrin, the forgotten passage where the geometry of time unfolded like a living map, only the heirs of the sacred blood could summon the crossing. That structure was not stone, it was echo. Memory. Vertigo. Talorcan was afraid. 3 of the formulas he needed to recite were uncertain, and without access to the original texts, his success hung by a thread. And still he had no choice. Aeryn Morwyn was now an indispensable part of his fate. He could not burden her yet with the weight of his plans. He still wanted her near, with that spark of desire in her eyes, not the fear that would inevitably come after. Because when she knew what he had to do, what he was, she might well hate him. He couldn't blame her. He had been trained to accept the sacrifice. The honor of his clan, the salvation of his line depended on it. And he would do whatever it took. Gazing at the sky, he whispered the ancient words. A soft spell, meant to keep the sleep of the one beside him deep and unbroken. A language dead for millennia, vibrated on his breath like an echo from the past. Had Aeryn woken in that instant, she would have seen him there, head tilted back, his lips barely moving as he spoke to the stars, and to the ghosts of his history.
But she didn't wake.
She slept in peace, wrapped in a silence woven by forgotten magic. Chapter 5. March 21st, in the morning. Aeryn had never been so acutely aware of her small stature, 1 meter 57, as she was in that moment, struggling to keep up with the colossal stride of a man who seemed to ignore the very concept of human physical limits. With each long step and arms swinging to gain momentum, she knew the effort was futile. Talorcan's mass tripled hers, and that simple law of physics propelled him forward without pause, untouched by fatigue. "MacRhean, I swear I'll kill you if you don't slow down." "I'm intrigued," he replied with a hint of mockery. "How do you plan to do that if you can barely keep up?" She was in no mood for jokes. "I'm exhausted and hungry. Just an hour ago you ate one of those bars from your strange package when we stopped to check your map," he reminded her with druidic calm.
"That wasn't food.
I'm hungry for something real." And also, Aeryn thought with a stab of desperation, because her map showed that the path to Brathren, the supposed location of his mysterious stones, was a marathon across the wildest Scottish countryside. "Would you like me to hunt a rabbit for you?" he asked with unsettling casualness. "I can skin it in an instant." She grimaced. "No thanks. Just stop at the next town. I still can't believe you wouldn't let me enter Fairhaven. They had coffee there. If we want to reach Brathren by dawn we can't stop." "And you're still fixated on those ridiculous stones," Aeryn grumbled. "Tomorrow you'll understand their purpose," he said, patting the sporran where he carefully kept several of them. "Tomorrow. Everything will be revealed tomorrow. We'll never reach that tomorrow, and you expect blind faith from me, MacRhean." He looked at her gravely.
"Yes, Aeryn Morwyn.
I ask for faith. But I promise you'll know it was worth it. If you wish, I can carry you. I'd rather you just slow down a little." For the first time since they'd set out, he showed a faint sign of impatience. "Girl, if your map is accurate, we have until tomorrow night to cover nearly 130 kilometers. That means walking non-stop at a steady pace. While I could run much of the way, I know you can't. If you can keep 4 kilometers per hour, you'll be able to rest later."
"That's impossible," Aeryn panted.
"Once I ran a kilometer in 10.5 minutes, and nearly died. And that was just 1 kilometer.
"Then we'll have to keep moving."
"There's no alternative."
"Yes, there is.
"We can rent a car," she tried again. "We'd get there in an hour." Talorcan looked at her with an inscrutable expression, as if she'd just suggested summoning a dragon. "I trust my feet more than those metal carriages. Come on. It's just a simple solution. We'd get to your stones quickly, and you could show me whatever you want." "I can't show you anything today. It must be tomorrow. The stones, they only respond at the right time." "And what about the castle you said you had to visit? Didn't you need to stop there?" "My duty is to the stones. The castle can wait. This isn't Newtonian physics. Besides, I think you're scared," Aeryn said, gambling on a tactic. Talorcan gave her a baffled look. He didn't know who Newton was, but he definitely felt provoked. "I don't fear your modern machines. I simply find them unnecessary." "Perfect. Then let's get that car. You'll save yourself days of walking." He swallowed hard. Aeryn noticed it, and knew she'd struck a nerve. Maybe, she thought, he really wasn't from her time. Could an actor be that consistent in character? "Very well," he relented at last, sighing with resignation. I'll ride your infernal carriage. But only because I recognize I need time to prepare. And you clearly won't be speeding up. Aeryn smiled. When they got back to Fairhaven, she'd take care of her blisters, have some coffee, maybe some chocolate, and get him dressed in something less conspicuous. She'd rent a car and drive him to his family. Finally, things were starting to make some sense again. And he, walking beside her, suddenly looked miserable. She didn't laugh out of politeness, but she knew she'd worn the same expression hours earlier. The morning was improving. The nicotine patch was working, and so was her willpower. Control was everything. Her mother had taught her that in a sharp British voice: if you control the cause, you master the effect. If not, all that's left is to blame yourself. Thanks, Mother, she thought wryly. Even though both her parents were dead, they still seemed to have opinions about her life. And she was right. In her distraction, she dropped her backpack without checking her surroundings, triggering a series of unfortunate events that had brought her here, with a man who might be insane or possessed by something ancient. There was no turning back. She could only minimize the damage. And now, as they reached the village, she realized he couldn't go in just like that. You can't go on, Talorcan.
Not dressed like that.
He looked at her, surprised. I'm more covered than you, he replied with a dignity that seemed inherited from centuries past. Maybe, but it's not the same. You can't stroll around half naked and armed to the teeth. You look like a warrior out of a legend. I won't leave you alone, Aeryn Morwyn. I gave you my word I'd help you. I'll keep it. I have no way of knowing whether your word means anything.
It does.
But you're not walking into Fairhaven with a sword on your back, and an entire arsenal hanging off you. You can keep one knife, just one. The rest stays here. We'll retrieve it later. He clenched his jaw, clearly offended. But he agreed. Under an oak tree, he laid down his weapons with a look of regret, then turned toward the village. Now what? He asked, seeing her stop him again. Aeryn pointed to the sword still slung across his back. You said I could keep a knife. You didn't specify the size. She sighed. Maybe after all, the sword was part of the costume. At the only rental agency open at that hour, Aeryn secured the last available car, a small, modest vehicle that barely looked fit to handle the roads leading to the Highlands. She'd pick it up in an hour, just enough time to buy clothes, supplies, and a coffee strong enough to clear her mind before heading to Clynmore. Talorcan walked beside her, unintentionally drawing the eyes of passersby, as if his mere presence evoked something ancient and tangible. Aeryn guided him gently, though she sometimes had to tug firmly at his arm when he stopped, fascinated by objects that were ordinary to her but foreign to his world. She finally led him to Callahan's, a store that carried everything from sporting goods to tourist essentials. There, among racks and hangers, she would try to dress him in modern clothing that gave him an acceptable appearance. With luck, that would reduce the curious stares first aimed at him, like a warrior stepped out of a medieval tapestry, and then at her, as if no one could fathom why a modern woman was walking beside such a figure. Maybe afterward they'd have lunch with Talorcan's family. Maybe she'd explain how she'd found him, entrust him to his kin, and go on her way rejoining her hiking group. But, could she really leave him behind? After the previous night, the question had rooted itself deep in her chest. There was no rush to return to the United States. Nothing called her back, not even the beautiful house on a hill in Skelmore, which had become a mausoleum of memories after her parents died. Maybe she'd stay at a nearby bed and breakfast, at least for a while. It was the least she could do. And perhaps deep down it was what she wanted. While she pondered this, Talorcan had wandered off and was now touching a lavender sweatshirt, running his fingers over the soft fabric like it told some ancient story. Aeryn shook her head but let him explore. He couldn't get into much trouble. She focused on finding clothes that could fit the man who looked carved from granite. His shoulders were broad, his back powerful. Most shirts wouldn't work. Maybe a fitted V-neck cotton tee could do the trick, just not in white. The contrast with his golden skin and dark mane would be dangerously alluring. She felt him approach and shivered. The saleswoman, a tall, slim woman in her 30s, looked at him like she'd conjured him from a dream. "You wear old-fashioned clothes, don't you?" the woman said, ignoring Aeryn completely.
"That fabric is stunning."
"I've never seen anything like it." Talorcan calmly crossed his arms. The leather straps creaked as he moved. "And you won't. This Caer Thalanis is one of a kind." His certainty lit the air around him. Aeryn wasn't surprised when the woman's interest turned suddenly unprofessional. She shoved a stack of pants and shirts into his arms, forcing him to break his proud stance. The woman purred.
"Let me take you to the fitting room.
I'm sure we'll find something satisfying." Aeryn stepped in, blocking the narrow hallway with a firm stance. "We lost our luggage. This is all he has. We don't need help." The woman scoffed and gave her a critical look, from the mud on her boots to her barely groomed eyebrows. Then, with a cutting accent, she added,
"Found yourself a Scot, did you?
You Americans always pounce on our men like you do with whiskey. And I don't think you can handle that, either." "I handle my husband well enough to get him out of here," Aeryn replied, louder than she intended. "Aeryn," Talorcan called from the fitting room.
"Yes," she answered, jolted by a sudden fantasy involving chocolate syrup.
"These trousers by Emergen." The invocation startled her. Emergen was a mythical druid, a bard from ancient lore. How much of that world still lived inside him? How much did Talorcan truly know of old mysteries? She sighed. He seemed to be struggling with modern clothes. If he was wearing an authentic 16th century plaid, as her guidebook had suggested, he probably wasn't wearing anything beneath it. She heard the zipper and more soft curses. "Come out and let me see," she said, trying to sound indifferent.
"You'll have to come in," he replied, voice low and rough.
Aeryn glanced at Miriam, who was now arguing with a teenager, and slipped inside the fitting room. Talorcan stood with his back to her, staring into the mirror. The fitted jeans clung alarmingly to a sculpted physique, and his dark hair flowed like a river down his back. "Turn around," she said, throat dry. He did. His bare chest was a vision of controlled strength. His firm abdomen tapered down to where the denim stretched in a dangerously suggestive way. "What are you hiding in those pants, MacRhean?"
"Nothing God didn't give me," he said, dead serious.
She stared at him, incredulous. "There's no way that's real. You stuffed a sock or something." Talorcan stepped in, pressing her gently against the door. His smile was dangerously calm. "Then you'll have to find out for yourself. Touch the sock." Aeryn shook her head, her heart pounding in her ears. "Find pants that don't threaten your manhood," she said, pretending to stay cool. "Don't let it scare you. When I make love to you, you'll see, we're meant to fit perfectly." His voice was a whisper laced with enchantment, like an ancient Celtic melody woven with spellwork. Aeryn closed her eyes. If she didn't step back now, her hands or teeth would end up in his jeans. "Step away, or I'll force you into them," she warned. "With your sword, if I must." "Look at me, Aeryn," he whispered so tenderly it disarmed her. "Aeryn," she corrected faintly. "Aeryn," he repeated with reverence just before kissing her. The trial of desire and magic. A sudden heat surged through Aeryn like a flame. The touch of that man was a living current, vibrant and real. The attraction between them crackled in the air, almost tangible, and she knew he felt it too. Talorcan looked at her with an ancient intensity, almost reverent. He moved closer with dangerous calm, parting her lips with a delicate motion, as if seeking something beyond a kiss, a communion, a recognition. Yes, Aeryn thought, this was what she needed. This connection, this fire. He inclined his head like a knight from legend, precise, elegant, and his mouth met hers. The warmth of his tongue slid in like an ancestral secret, and Aeryn felt herself suspended between two realities. He wasn't just a mysterious Scot. He was a force of nature. Talorcan held her firmly by the waist, his large confident hands moving over her curves, not rushed, but with a purpose that spoke of a knowledge deeper than the physical. When she arched against him, it wasn't just passion, it was an invocation, a summoning. What magic is this, she wondered. It was as if her body responded to an ancient melody, only he could play. But in that moment, a mundane voice shattered the enchantment. "Would you like a different size or style?" Miriam asked, from the other side of the fitting room door. Aeryn blinked, disoriented. The spell broke, leaving behind a mix of desire, shame, and surprise. What was she doing, surrendering like this to a man she barely knew, in the fitting room of a Scottish store? Pulling away with effort, she whispered firmly, "Enough." But Talorcan didn't let go immediately. The fire still burned in his eyes, and his expression promised they would continue where they'd left off. At last, with a touch of courtly theatrics, he bowed and opened the door with a mocking flourish. Aeryn, cheeks still flushed, tried to compose herself. Miriam, of course, had seen everything, or nearly everything. Her gaze didn't leave Talorcan, now standing in unzipped jeans and no shirt, a sight that had clearly left her speechless. "Are you going to get him the pants?" Aeryn reminded her sharply. Miriam barely reacted. "Oh yes. Maybe some joggers too. They're roomy." From inside, Talorcan asked for the deep jade green trousers with a smile that could undo any woman. "No," Aeryn muttered. But even as she said it, her thoughts were far from that store. What was happening to her? Had someone slipped a spell or aphrodisiac into her drink? She remembered Fianna's words, "Find a man you can talk to in the small hours, with whom you can argue and still burn." Talorcan seemed to be both. A mystery with fire. An ancient warrior with the soul of a druid. Maybe she wasn't so crazy, she thought. Maybe it was the call of something greater. When Talorcan touched her, everything made sense, as if the world had a secret order revealed only through his skin. Aeryn, small in stature but unyielding in spirit, had struck that man like a celestial force. Talorcan knew it. Deep within, he felt the pounding of druidic blood, ancient and powerful, responding to her. Aeryn was not just a woman. She was his axis, his spell, his fate. And for the first time in a long while, nothing else mattered. He defied the laws of nature. With a silent sigh, he surrendered to the pull of his thoughts. In front of the mirror he examined his own reflection, his figure, lean and poised, dressed in a garment foreign to his time. The black trousers, called jogging pants in this era, felt strange to him, snug yet slack, elastic at the waist and ankles, made from a dense fabric, possibly even waterproof. They weren't purple, the color of kings, but at least they weren't disgraceful. The faded blue of another pair had hurt his eyes, dyed with a clumsiness no weaver from his clan would have ever tolerated. Another, in pale chestnut though comfortable, made him look like a farmhand. And he was no farmer. He was Caer Thalanis. Tucked under his arm, his ceremonial mantle, deep imperial jade green interwoven with silver threads, rested in order, bound with 3 leather straps. It pained him to see how, in this strange era, anyone could buy garments of deep jade green without honor or ceremony. In the old days, the Caer Thalanis had been granted the sacred right to wear the 7 royal colors and the 7 slabs of the oath, covenants that could not be broken without consequence. His bloodline had earned the jade green, and by ancestral right he could wear it. And by the gods he was alive. Perhaps the last of his clan, yes, but with burning blood still running in his veins. He would soon reach the stones, the very ones that had brought him here. He would find the cause of his diverted path. This modern world unsettled him, the harsh noises, the foreign smells, the disjointed rhythm of the earth itself. But if needed, he would ride a fire dragon just to return that same day to Caer Thalanis, the hidden fortress in the heart of Tir Naraith, where his lineage, the Fennaith, still guarded the secrets of the sacred. Not all druidic clans are Fennaith. Only those who never broke the pact with the earth. The MacRhean, since the days of Naraith, had been the oldest among them. They held the ability to read stones, to summon the elements, and to recall the true names of things. He prayed for Shannon, who, perhaps against the logic of time, had survived and left descendants. But if not, he begged to find his fortress intact, with the druidic codices safe, and that by the next midnight the stones would return him to his century, to his land, to his time. He cast aside the strange, stiff white shoes with their ridiculous laces that she had left him, and once again put on his leather boots. He fastened his belt and covered himself with the light fabric they called a t-shirt in this era, though he couldn't tell if it was a shirt, a tunic, or some ritual garb. He tugged at the collar to loosen it, uncomfortable with how tight it was across his chest. Before leaving, he paused and let his gaze linger over the woman's body. Aeryn. So small, so strong. And though he knew she wasn't ready to accept it, he sensed they were meant for each other. He hoped to prove it to her more than once. There was something about Aeryn Morwyn that ignited a dangerous spark in him, stubborn, sharp, dominant. He wanted to tear her clothes off, lay her in the grass, provoke her until her will gave way and she called him by his name. He wanted to taste her skin, to lose himself in her body. The kiss they had shared had barely stoked the desire. He remembered with a stifled groan how hard it had been to free himself from the tight pants he'd worn then, when desire had overtaken him. At the door he strapped the sporran around his waist, secured one of the leather ties and slid the sword into place. Then, silent as a predator, he approached the young woman. He placed his hands on her slender waist and smiled as his fingers traveled downward, appreciating the delicate curve of her back. He was about to caress her when she tensed and slipped from his arms like an alert deer. One eyebrow rose with arrogance when the clerk looked at him. "My wife's still not used to me," he said with a calm smile.
"We haven't been married long."
The sound of that word, wife, pleased him more than he expected. He savored it inwardly like a promise. "Nice sword," the clerk murmured, not realizing she was looking a hand's width from where the weapon actually hung. Aeryn spun on her heel.
"Let's go, husband," she said firmly.
The word slipped from her lips with a strange weight. The way he looked at her ignited something inside her she feared she wouldn't be able to control for long. If she ever had. "I wish I could get used to you," the clerk whispered, watching as the man guided her to the exit with a firm protective hand resting at the small of her back. He turned for a moment and gave her a smile that looked like an ancient flame escaped from a myth. Chapter 6. The winters came. The men of iron came. With crosses of fire and laws of stone. You went south with an oath in your palm. I remained keeper of the cycle, dressed in mist. Aeryn's spirits lifted as she neared the small cafe. A delicate aroma of freshly ground coffee beans floated in the air like a promise of comfort. Soon she would have a cappuccino in hand, and perhaps a warm chocolate roll or a bitter orange and blueberry brioche. As she crossed the threshold, she let out a sigh that was nearly a murmur of gratitude. "There are many people," observed Talorcan, uneasy, his eyes scanning the room with tribal suspicion. "Does all this territory belong to a single laird?" Aeryn looked at him, amused by his solemnity, and thought the white shirt made his imposing presence even more striking. Talorcan MacRhean, even dressed simply, radiated the majesty of another age. His mere presence seemed to shift the air, as if the essence of ancient Gaelic kings still walked the earth. "No, each belongs to a different family," she replied, guiding him gently through the tables crowded with tourists and locals. Talorcan frowned, genuinely surprised. "And they're peaceful? Different clans eating together without throwing stones or curses?" His voice was loud enough that several patrons turned to look. Aeryn shot him a glare. "Shush. We're drawing attention." "I always draw attention," he replied simply. "Even more so in this era. People are small." She huffed, pride stung. "Quiet. Let me talk to the clerk." "Behave, please." "I am behaving," he muttered with a logic that belonged to another century, and wandered off to examine the strange steel machines that roared and exhaled steam. In Scotland, and especially in the remote corners where the last Highland druids survived, neither coffee nor cacao were known, not even as exotic goods from distant lands. Talorcan, of course, had never tasted either. While Aeryn took care of the order, he roamed with the undimmed curiosity of an old child. He touched jars as if they were ritual relics, smelled the coffee bags with a blend of distrust and wonder, lifted objects as if they held ancient magic. And it was then among the scented shelves that he did it. He slid a couple of jars, cinnamon and cocoa, into his pockets without remorse, as if stealing a secret from time itself.
"What are you doing?"
Aeryn whispered, pulling him into a corner. "They're valuable spices. Shannon adores them. They're hard to come by in my time." "But they're not yours," she said, trying to stay calm. Talorcan looked at her, proud and serene. "I am a MacRhean. Everything is." She sighed, incredulous at such a feudal claim.
"Put them back."
"Do it yourself, if they bother you so much."
"I'm not putting my hand in your pockets," she replied, red as a poppy. "Then they stay there."
The Highlander's stubbornness was as colossal as his shoulders. But Aeryn had her own steel. She reached into his pocket and firmly retrieved the jars. Yet as her fingers brushed his thigh, she felt the heat of his skin through the fabric and turned away, unsettled by a sudden rush of desire. Talorcan, offended, pulled out the spices and slammed them onto the counter before walking out without a word. Aeryn followed him, coffee cups trembling in her hands. As she passed a family, she heard a child's voice. "Did you see his sword? He looked like a real warrior." She blushed, quickened her pace and called out, "Talorcan, wait. I'm sorry." He stopped halfway, and as he turned, his smile disarmed all her anger. The sun touched his profile, and for a moment Aeryn felt she was looking at a man born of legend. "You like me," he said confidently.
"That's not certain," she lied, though she knew her eyes betrayed her. "Yes, you like me," he insisted, stepping closer.
"You called me by my given name, and nearly cried at the thought of hurting me. That's enough." Aeryn looked away, uncomfortable with the truth.
"What does Nyef mean?" she asked suddenly, recalling a woman's comment in the store.
Talorcan laughed, a gleam of amusement in his eyes. "Who dared call you that?" "A rude woman. Don't laugh." "Nyaf," he repeated, savoring it.
"It's a Scottish word.
It describes something small and annoying, like a vain mosquito that thinks it has the importance of a red deer." Aeryn turned, ready to march back to the store and tell Miriam exactly what she thought of her, but Talorcan stopped her with a gentle gesture. "She was jealous, girl. She envied you for having a man like me at your side, and more so seeing me in those trousers. You couldn't be more pleased with yourself, could you?" "You're no Nyaf, Aeryn," he said tenderly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "She saw in my gaze what I feel when I look at you. And that, my sweet maiden, sparks fires in others." She looked at him, undone by his gentleness and the certainty in his voice. Something inside her loosened, opened without intent. It wasn't just desire. She felt a protective surge, a need to be near him, to understand him. What had begun as an accident in time was now an inevitable crossing of souls. And that, she thought as they walked toward the rental office, was more dangerous than any druidic magic. Chapter 7. Castle of Caer Thalanis, when the stones speak. March 21st dusk. A blown tire, a man incapable of using even a jack, 3 rest stops, 4 coffees, a delayed lunch, and hours later, Aeryn and her enigmatic companion arrived on the outskirts of Clinmore just as twilight painted the sky in shades of mauve. Aeryn glanced sideways at him. His face was still pale, colorless, since she had dared to accelerate beyond what he seemed able to tolerate. Despite his formidable build, he had clutched the seat with such intensity that she thought the mere prick of a fingernail might have made him explode from the tension. Luckily, she had slowed down in time. The rim bent only a few miles from Fairhaven, forcing them to walk back, contact the rental agency, and wait for a mechanic to arrive. She tried to rent another car, but none were available until the next day. Once the issue was resolved, they resumed the journey. Little by little, he relaxed enough to accept a coffee and some snacks. He complained half in jest about the absence of herrings and swedes, of those soft roots that tasted of sweet earth and the fish that tasted of the sea, but devoured chocolate and coffee with an almost childlike delight. Aeryn found it puzzling that someone like him, supposedly from another time, could enjoy such ordinary things. God help her, but she was beginning to believe him. They spoke little along the way. More than lack of intent, it seemed a matter of restraint. He appeared incapable of loosening his soul enough to surrender to conversation. Now, with the lights of Clynmore in sight, the man's figure was a silhouette against the darkening sky. "Would you like to stop in the village?" she asked, vaguely hoping to persuade him to have dinner and rest.
"No," he replied curtly.
He pried his fingers from the edge of the seat and pointed north. "You must drive this iron beast to the top of that mountain." Aeryn followed the direction of his finger. According to her tourist brochure, there were 277 mountains in Scotland over 3,000 feet, and he was pointing toward one of them as if it belonged to him. Sighing, she skirted the village, slowed down, and began the climb. "Tell me about your home," she insisted, feeling a sudden disinterest. The day had been exhausting, and a thought struck her: what if there was no castle up there? What if, at the end of this journey, the man's mind broke completely? She had already fulfilled her part of the deal. She had brought him safely to Brathren. She could leave, but she sensed that meant nothing to a man like him. "Don't think I'll let you go now," he said, placing his hand over hers, which trembled on the gearshift. Aeryn shot him a glare.
"What are you?
A mind reader?" He smiled faintly. "No. I just remember that you promised to stay and witness my trials. I won't let you fail me now." "Are you going to chain me again?" she replied dryly. He didn't answer. And in the silence that followed, in the ambiguous twilight, she saw him change for a moment. A warrior from another time, focused on his mission, willing to cross centuries for it. "I have no intention of turning back," she said firmly. "Is turning back an act of dishonor?" he said, eyes fixed on the road.
"Then I won't allow it."
They drove in silence a little longer. "Do you enjoy a bard's rhyme, Aeryn?" "I've been accused of having a weakness for poetry. Would you do me the favor of reciting one?"
"Sure, why not?"
"I've already done about 50 things for you. One more won't kill me." He nodded, with a glimmer of humor. Then, in a soft voice, he recited, "Where you fall, there I shall be. 2 flames burning from a single ember. Forward and back flying through time. If your craft withers, remember." She was startled. The verse began tenderly, but ended on a dark, cryptic note.
"What does it mean?"
"Do you have a good memory, Aeryn Morwyn?" "Of course I do." "Say it again." She repeated it after him, exactly 3 times. He didn't smile, but he thanked her with such solemnity it made her skin prickle. "Does any of this have a purpose?"
"You've made me happy."
"Thank you."
"That seems to be my purpose lately," Aeryn said wryly.
"Is this one of those things I'll understand with time?" "If all goes well, no," he replied, a shadow in his voice. "Pray you never have to understand it." She changed the subject quickly, eager to steer the conversation elsewhere. They then spoke of trivial things. He described his castle with affection, the gardens, the towers, the latest renovations, while she, reserved, said little about herself. It was her habit. The more she revealed to a man, the less they seemed to like her in the end. But inexplicably, she wanted to please Talorcan MacRhean. The tension was building. When they finally reached the summit, Aeryn could barely control the wheel. But when she saw his hands trembling too, she understood the weight of the moment. He believed in all of it. This wasn't a trick nor madness. He truly feared the castle might no longer exist. A mental break, she thought, was far harder to heal than a wound of the body. She gripped the wheel, wishing the journey wouldn't end yet. "Turn north."
"There's no road there."
"I see one. And considering how far we've come, I believe this is about me now." She obeyed. The grass rose like a green carpet lit by the headlights. "Climb the hill," he instructed gently. Aeryn did. When he asked her to stop, the car's transmission was already faltering. The hill was steep. Then she saw them, the stone peaks of Brathren, tall, black, etched against the purplish sky. "I don't see any castle, MacRhean," she said cautiously. It's beyond the fell. We hid it well. Beyond the stones. Come, I'll show you. He fumbled nervously with the door handle and stepped out of the car. Aeryn followed him, feeling the tremor in her hands spread through her whole body. She was freezing, not from the cold but from the certainty that they were crossing a threshold, and that beyond it nothing would ever be the same. Under the purple sky of Scotland. One moment, let me grab my coat, said Aeryn. Talorcan waited in silence, his gaze fixed on the hilltop. There was a restrained urgency in him, a visceral need to climb to the stones and discover whether his castle still stood. Aeryn saw it in his expression. It wasn't impatience, it was desperation. Do you want something to eat before we go up? She asked, trying with a trivial gesture to delay the inevitable, as she rummaged through the box for the salmon and celery pasties they had bought at the last stop. He barely curved a smile. Come, Aeryn. Now. She shut the car door with resignation and followed him, walking steadily until she stood at his side. When he took her hand, she didn't pull away. The gesture was too human to reject. And too sad. They climbed in silence, accompanied only by the chirping of crickets and the distant murmur of frogs. A soft breeze swept through the grass around the stone circle, where dark megaliths rose stark against the mauve-streaked sky. Aeryn counted 13 stones arranged in a ritual shape, encircling a large central slab. In the midst of the landscape there was no sign of a castle, only gentle grassy slopes, a few scattered pines, and ancient ruins that concealed nothing but the weight of time. 13 was seen as a number beyond the human realm, reserved for the initiated. A circle of 12 and one that stands apart, the master, the guardian, the keeper of knowledge. In Celtic mythology, 13 was linked to the crossing of worlds. If 12 represented the order of the world, months, signs, tribes, then 13 marked the access to the other side, the liminal point. The druidic calendar was based on the moon. A year held 13 full lunar cycles, each lasting 28 days. 13 represented the complete cycle of nature, birth, death, and rebirth. The sacred tree system, each tree tied to a letter, was connected to 13 mother trees, used in rituals and for reading destiny. They crossed the stone ring in silence, their steps slowing until they reached the base where once perhaps a fortress had stood. Only remnants remained, moss-covered stones, fragments of walls, rubble buried in the tall grass. The silence of the place weighed heavier than any words. Aeryn avoided looking at him. She didn't want to see the despair in his face. When they reached the edge of the crumbling wall, Talorcan knelt. Aeryn kept her eyes on the ground, on the broken bits of rock and disturbed earth, on anything that might distract her from him. She couldn't face the reflection of a shattered mind. Not now. Oh God, they're all dead, he whispered, voice breaking. Who destroyed my people? Why? His breath trembled. Aeryn. Talorcan, she murmured softly. Please go back to the car for a moment, he said, his voice calm but empty. She hesitated, torn between obeying or staying with him. Part of her wanted to walk away, to end this madness. The other part, stronger, deeper, understood that he needed her there now more than ever. I'm not leaving you, she began. That's an order, he said, his voice shaking with fury. And then something strange happened. His eyes seemed to shine from within, as if holding an ancient, inhuman light. His voice changed. It was no longer just one man's voice, but a layered, resonant echo that seemed to come from a place far older than the mountain itself. Aeryn felt her body respond before her mind could. Her legs began to move, and she ran through the stones, not even knowing why. Only when she crossed the invisible threshold of the circle, did the force driving her vanish. She turned. She saw him then, alone among the ruins, standing atop a mound of broken stone, arms raised to the dark sky. He was the silhouette of an ancient warrior straight from legend, chest lifted to the heavens, face twisted with pain. When he cried out, a wail of mourning so deep and primal it froze her blood, Aeryn felt something inside her break. That wasn't the man who had kissed her in the shop room, who had stolen her breath and nearly her sanity. No. That was the warrior who had crossed centuries, armed with swords and secrets, with memories heavier than history itself. That was the man for whom, without knowing how, she was beginning to lose parts of herself. Something beyond reason, beyond desire. Something she hadn't even known she could give. MacRhean, she thought, shivering.
What the hell am I going to do with you?
Talorcan fell to his knees among the ruins and wept. His back rested where the great hall of the castle had once stood in pride. With one arm outstretched, his hands tangled in the tall grass, he thought of his father, Shannon. You have a purpose, my son, like all Caer Thalanis, to protect the line and the wisdom we have safeguarded for centuries. And he had failed. In a single moment of carelessness he had been ambushed, stripped of his time, buried for centuries. His disappearance hadn't just brought down walls of stone, it had extinguished a dynasty. The castle was now a broken echo in the land, and his clan barely a whisper lost in history. Shannon, his father, had to be dead, and with him the last spark of their lineage. And the tomes, the sacred tablets, the secrets of druidic knowledge, where were they? Had they fallen into corrupted hands? Talorcan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down on his shoulders. He knew what an ambitious man could do with the knowledge of the Caer Thalanis, alter the very shape of the world. He had to go back. To his time. To his people. Though his body had not aged, 500 years now stood between him and his purpose. No one remembered his name. No one spoke any more of the house of Caer Thalanis. Generations of training, druidic wisdom and warrior honor vanished in the blink of fate. Tomorrow. At dusk, he would enter the sacred stone circle, perform the ritual, and pray to return. He couldn't fail. If he succeeded, he would set history back on course. If he failed, he would be trapped in the folds of time, or worse, lose himself entirely. For hours he wandered the ruins, searching for signs. He visited what remained of the chapel courtyard, the old rowan tree where his father had wished to be buried. But no stone bore his name. Only one slab remained, marked Talorcan MacRhean, beloved son and brother. With trembling fingers, he touched the inscription. The pain burned in him, as if he had buried Talorcan only days ago. His brother had been his other half, his truest reflection. Losing him had brought madness to the edge of his soul. He remembered, in his desperation, how he had begged his father to let him use the stones to go back in time and save him. What good is knowledge if I can't undo my brother's death? He had shouted. Shannon had been resolute. You must never travel to a moment within your own lifetime. If two versions of yourself exist at the same time, only one can survive, or neither. Nature rebels against such a violation. And so Talorcan had renounced. He had accepted grief, reaffirmed his ancestral vow. To use the stones only to serve, protect, and preserve the Caer Thalanis line. Never for personal reasons. He knew well what the legends said. Whoever misused druidic magic out of ambition would become a dark druid, a soulless creature consumed by forbidden arts. Though the temptation was great, he couldn't betray his lineage. Talorcan was dead. Shannon too. Only he remained. And duty was stronger than sorrow. He ran a tired hand through his hair. The world had gone centuries without a true Caer Thalanis to protect it. He had to return and plant the seed of a new bloodline. Whatever the cost. And what price will Aeryn pay? Whispered his conscience. I have no choice, Talorcan murmured darkly. He knew the sequence to activate the time passage through the 13 stones. But not the 3 crucial symbols that indicated the exact date. He had been forbidden to memorize the codes of his own time, to prevent precisely this kind of journey. Now he had to guess the impossible. What if he made a mistake? What if he returned to the wrong moment? There was one hope, the sacred stone trays perhaps hidden by his father before the catastrophe. If he could find them, he could read the symbols precisely and choose the right date. The exact time to prevent the fall of the castle, to face his enemy, and fulfill the mission written in his blood. Perhaps he could still marry, restore the bloodline, and give birth to a new generation of Caer Thalanis guardians. He recalled a warning from Shannon, quiet but firm. You must learn to love with judgment. True love is rare, but we cannot afford extinction. Talorcan closed his eyes. He could not afford to love, and yet Aeryn. So small, so naive, so unlike anything he had ever known. And still, she had slipped under his skin like fire. Night fell. Only one morning remained to find the trays. To find a way back. And if he failed, then at least, he still had Aeryn. Chapter 8. Under the Highlands firmament. Aeryn sat on the car hood, silently eating celery stalks and salmon tarts, soaking in the last traces of warmth still rising from the engine. Around her, night was slowly weaving itself in indigo threads, darkening into a black velvet sky dusted with stars. She glanced at her watch. Almost 2 hours had passed since she'd left Talorcan among the ruins. She could leave. She could start the car, turn around, and disappear into the night. Leave that strange man and his madness behind, let him face whatever haunted him alone. But she didn't move. Why not? She thought of Newton's laws and half-joked to herself that maybe Talorcan had so much mass that she was inevitably pulled into his orbit, like the Earth around the Sun. Some kind of emotional gravity, unreasonable, stubborn, and unrelenting. Her thoughts wandered as she hummed quietly, hugging her knees and gazing at the sky. Something didn't sit right. She could feel it. A visceral instinct she couldn't ignore. She'd never paid much attention to intuition, she trusted logic, the observable. But over the last 36 hours, her body had been screaming things her mind couldn't make sense of. She had spent a while watching him from a distance, like a scientist before a baffling phenomenon. But the more she observed, the more questions she had. His body was that of a disciplined man, hardened by labor or battle. His hands, rough and weathered, said more than 1,000 words. His stride, steady and upright, revealed confidence and command. And his mind shone with unexpected clarity. He didn't seem insane. Not like any madman she'd ever seen. He had known how to get out of the cavern. Though once they emerged, the tunnel had collapsed, overgrown with ancient, dense vegetation. And those words almost torn from his soul. "Och, by the old gods, they're all dead." The simplest explanation, said Occam's razor, is usually the most likely. And if that was true, what if he was telling the truth? What if, by some forgotten science or ancient magic, he had slept for 500 years and she had awakened him? It was absurd. But the doubt lingered. What if there was an answer, some tangible proof that explained the marvel? What if there was still a clue among those ancient stones, a trace of druidic knowledge or arcane science that history had misplaced? She admitted it wasn't just scientific curiosity. There was another kind of yearning, a silent deep call that had more to do with the soul than the intellect. She had felt tenderness toward him, a true compassion when she saw the tears in his eyes. She didn't just want to comfort him, she wanted to care for him. Her heart, whether she admitted it or not, was already involved. She tucked her bangs behind her ear and climbed down from the car. She'd had enough time alone. It was time to talk to him. Among the ancient stones. "Talorcan," she called, her clear voice cutting through the dusk. He looked up. Aeryn approached with a steady step. Small, yes, but resolute. Though fear flickered in her eyes, she faced him with the dignity of a knight stepping into battle. He had feared she'd left. Seeing her come was a balm. He knew then that whatever she had decided about him, she had chosen to stay. "Do you feel better now?" she asked cautiously. "I've reached a temporary truce with my emotions," he replied, his voice rough. "Don't worry, I don't plan to avenge my people just yet." She nodded firmly. "Good." He noticed she didn't want to argue. Instead of confronting him with accusations, she was trying to build a bridge. He wondered what she'd do next. "I memorized your poem," she said suddenly. "Now it's your turn to do me a favor." "As you wish, Aeryn. Ask anything you like." "Just a few questions." "I'll answer what I can." How much earth is in a hole 1 foot wide, 9 inches long, and 3.5 feet deep? He frowned. That was a familiar riddle. There's no earth in a hole, he answered. She smiled.
Very good, but that was a trick.
What about this one? A rowboat is anchored with a ladder hanging over its side. Each rung is 9 inches apart. The tide rises 6 inches per hour. If the first rung touches the water when the tide starts to rise, how many rungs will be underwater after 8 hours? Talorcan didn't take long.
None.
The boat rises with the tide. She looked at him, astonished. And if I ask what's 42 times 15? 630. Aeryn's eyes went wide. My God. You did that in your head. Numbers have always come easy to me. Have my answers helped you? She nodded, unsettled. This man was a fascinating enigma. His mind sharp. His body honed. And something else, something nameless, drew her to him. Talorcan, for his part, no longer doubted. Aeryn wasn't just beautiful and intelligent, she had come into his life for a reason. Maybe he couldn't prove the truth to her just yet, but he was convinced fate had woven their paths together.
Come, he said, opening his arms.
Give me something real to hold. I won't hurt you. Aeryn stepped closer and sat beside him. After a moment's pause, she let out a soft sigh and, to his surprise, wrapped her arms around his head, pulling him to her chest. He slipped his arms around her waist and drew her onto his lap, feeling something deep within begin to heal at the warmth of her closeness. I suppose you're not going to show me anything tomorrow, are you? As I promised, tomorrow I'll prove I'm telling the truth. Will you stay? Help me search the ruins? Aeryn ran her fingers through his hair. Her nails brushed his scalp, and Talorcan exhaled in contentment. Yes, Talorcan MacRhean, she said with the accent of a true Highland daughter. I'll stay and help you. He laughed, heart lightened.
That's good, lass.
You're no fool. And I think we could still make a proper Highland lady out of you. Chapter 9. Your eyes, ancient lakes beneath the bronze moon. Spoke before your voice did. You said, time is a river that doesn't wait. And I replied, but there are still waters where the soul lingers. That night, Aeryn slept wrapped in the arms of a Highlander, nestled among heather and wildflowers beneath the silver curve of an ancient moon, hanging like a spoon in a silent sky. And if Talorcan, with a soul marked by the shadow of the wolf, burned with the desire to make her his, he imposed upon himself the only command his honor would allow, to be content simply holding her. They spent the entire day searching for the stones, the 7 ritual slabs that, according to Talorcan, held the secret of time. The excavations were fruitless. When the sky turned indigo, pierced by the distant clarity of stars, Talorcan lit a fire in the heart of the megalithic circle. If the worst were to happen that night, Aeryn had to know everything. He had told her, as they dug through the rubble, what had happened before his disappearance. He spoke of the note he received, a message that promised to reveal the name of the Keldrythe who had killed his brother. Consumed by grief and the fever of revenge, he had gone alone to the clearing by the lake. He hadn't called his men. Rage clouded his judgment. Then something strange happened. A heavy fatigue enveloped him, his senses dulled as if he'd been drugged. The last thing he felt was the invisible pressure dragging him to the ground, his armor being removed, the ancient symbols painted on his chest, and then nothing until Aeryn woke him. He also spoke of his lineage, of his brilliant and stubborn father, of Neria, the woman who raised him with fierce tenderness. Of the young village priest, son of a meddling seer who chased him down the corridors, eager to read his palm. Aeryn, skeptical at first, ended up listening with a blend of a smile and nostalgia. When Talorcan spoke of his childhood with Caelan, his twin, she laughed with her whole heart for the first time. Talorcan sensed with a reverent silence that Aeryn hadn't known much laughter or warmth in her life. It was confirmed when he asked if she had any siblings. She shook her head and murmured that her mother, already elderly, hadn't been able to have more children. When he asked why she hadn't married and had her own, she looked away. I never found the right man, she said. He wished, with a force that surprised him, to be that man. He wished to see her laugh more, to see her wake beside him every morning, to share the weight of their wounds and the fire of their desire. He yearned for her body, yes, but not only that. Something deeper was beginning to form inside him. A slow, ancient flame fed by respect, admiration and tenderness. The kind of passion that binds a man to a woman forever.
But time was slipping through their fingers.
Leave it, Aeryn, he called out while she continued stubbornly digging through the ruins. Come. Spend this final hour with me. She turned to him, dust on her cheek, tired and beautiful in the flickering firelight.
We haven't found the slabs yet, she replied.
It's too late, he answered, his voice heavy with druidic resignation. If they haven't appeared, it's because time no longer wishes to yield them. Spend this hour with me. The night before, Aeryn had slept in his arms, and Talorcan had awoken with her face imprinted on his soul. The tenderness that struck him in that moment was stronger than any carnal desire. She finally came over to the fire. She sat beside him, wiping her hands with a damp cloth, sighing with the simple relief of shaking off dust and fatigue. Meanwhile, he broke the stones he had gathered one by one, revealing a heart of shimmering dust within each. He mixed the substance with water until it formed a thick paste. Rock paint, he explained. With it, he began to draw symbols and complex formulas on the megaliths in the circle. Aeryn watched, fascinated and bewildered at once. Some of the signs seemed vaguely familiar, as if she had dreamed of them before, or learned them in some forgotten corner of her academic memory. When she saw him caress the symbol of infinity with reverence, she understood she was in the presence of ancient knowledge. The Lemnis Gate. The Mobius Band. The Apeiron of the ancients. Who was this man really? Could he be wiser than she was? Her defiant heart beat wildly, like a stone skipping across a calm lake. Talorcan, now dressed in his traditional garb, kilt and armor, looked like a vision torn from another century. Aeryn, though trying to focus on the stones, couldn't help the searing heat that swept over her when she looked at him. Every part of him spoke of strength, passion, and a legacy older than the mountains themselves. His very presence made her burn from within. Logic dissolved at his side. The night seemed to belong to him. What are you doing with those stones? She managed to ask, her voice a thread of nerves and something deeper. I've told you all I could, he said, his eyes darkened by the weight of what was to come.
You don't trust me, she murmured, hurt.
Lass, don't ever think that, he said, with genuine pain in his voice. But there are truths that can't be spoken before their time, because the human heart must be ready to receive them. She didn't know it yet, but that night would be the threshold of something irreversible. And though Talorcan feared that once she knew everything, Aeryn might turn away from him forever, he could no longer stop the course of the ancient designs. Time, like fate, was already sealed in stone.
Nonsense, she said with gentle impatience, brushing off his objections.
If you trust me, then nothing is forbidden. I do trust you, little one, he replied in a low voice filled with something deeper than desire. More than you can imagine, with my life. Perhaps even with the very memory of my bloodline. And how can I believe in you if you don't trust me? Always the skeptic, aren't you, Aeryn? He chided her tenderly. Kiss me, before I draw the final symbols. For good fortune, he added, with urgency. His eyes, mirrors of a soul marked by centuries, gleamed like shards of glass catching the last light of day. Aeryn tried to answer, but he gently placed a finger on her lips.
Please, lass, just kiss me.
No more words. We've said too many already. He paused, and with a voice barely a whisper, if something must be said, let it be your heart that speaks now. She closed her eyes for a moment. There were no questions in her chest. Earlier, when she saw him descend into the village as if carrying 1,000 winters on his back, she had understood, without need for words, that she would give him what she had never given before. It wasn't a rushed decision, but a quiet revelation, like the awakening of a sleeping truth. She knew what she was going to do. The truth, if it had to be said, was that she had known it from the moment their eyes met. The days that followed, had only served for her spirit to align with the choice. It wasn't mere attraction, it was surrender. In body, mind, and soul, she had been conquered by him. She wanted him with a hunger that defied logic or names. When he spoke, when he touched her, something ancient stirred within her, as if she had known him before time began. That he might be mad, lost between eras, no longer mattered. She had heard him speak of his clan, with the reverence of someone guarding the ashes of his lineage. If he needed her to guide him, she would. If she had to search all of Scotland for the echo of his name, she would. If it meant following him in his madness to the last threshold, she would not hesitate. She tucked her hair behind her ear, and looked at him directly, with a stillness that seemed to rise from the earth itself. "Make love to me, Talorcan," she said. He went still, as if time itself had stopped. "Did you really say that? Or have I finally crossed the last frontier of madness?" "Make love to me," she repeated, and this time her voice did not tremble. The warrior's pale blue eyes shone with barely contained intensity. "You honor me, lass," he said, and as he opened his arms, she flew into them like a leaf on the wind. He held her with the gentle strength of someone protecting something sacred, wrapping her in an embrace that spoke of more than desire, it spoke of fate. They walked to the circle of ancient stones. There, at the heart of the druidic legacy, under the whisper of a starry sky, he kissed her. The man's hips found hers in an ancestral language, and when she moaned, he drank that sound like a lost spell. "I've wanted you since the moment I saw you," he murmured, his voice broken. "Me too," she replied, nearly breathless. "Och lass, why didn't you tell me sooner? We could have lived these 3 days in fire." "We wouldn't have reached your stones if we had," she whispered, wishing he would stop talking and kiss her again. He laughed, and the kiss that followed was so fierce it left her trembling. It wasn't a gentle union. It was the collision of souls that had been searching for each other, through time. Aeryn wasn't inexperienced in love stories, but nothing she had ever known compared to the raw intensity of that moment. He wasn't just her lover, he was an echo of something vaster, a force that claimed her. When their bodies were finally bare beneath the shelter of the megalithic stones, he looked at her with reverence. There was no lust, only wonder. He touched her like one touches a relic. Every part of her body was explored with firm but trembling hands, as if every caress summoned forgotten memories from his ancestral blood. He kissed her chest like a silent devotee at prayer. Aeryn arched toward him, guiding him without words, showing with her body that she needed him, not just out of desire but because something inside her begged to be healed. "You're beautiful," he said, and his lips descended along her belly like a prayer made flesh. When they were finally joined, it was as if the ancient world and the modern one fused. There were no cries or moans, only shared breaths, restrained tremors. Everything between them was reverent, the rhythm, the touch, the silence. He held her as if afraid she might vanish. And she, wrapped in his warmth, understood that this moment wasn't simply physical, it was an offering. A rite. A promise made between ancestral stones and watchful stars. And as they moved, skin to skin, joined as one beneath the highland sky, she knew she would never be the same again. Talorcan's deep, rough voice slid over Aeryn like an ancient enchanted chant. Though she didn't understand his words, she recognized the reverent tone, as if her soul were being worshipped. That ancestral language, with its strange accents and hypnotic cadence, wrapped around her like a bewitching mist. In some lucid corner of her mind, she wondered if she was being enchanted, because with every word he spoke in that forgotten tongue, something inside her ignited, opened like thirsty earth under the first rain. His hands, large and firm, moved over her skin as if memorizing her geography, as if every fold and every curve were part of a sacred map. There was no rush in his touch, only devotion. He kissed her breasts, cradled them with reverent care, brought them together to kiss the hollow between them, then descended with burning lips, planting caresses like a druid worshipping a living altar. Aeryn could barely breathe. The sensations were so intense, so unknown, she felt herself dissolve with every shudder. Talorcan moved lower, kissing her belly with tenderness, and when his tongue found the hidden center of her desire, her body arched, propelled by a primal wave. His hands lifted her with gentle strength, his mouth adored her without pause, until Aeryn, broken open by unfamiliar joy, felt herself trembling again and again from within, as if each spasm released her from centuries of unspoken silences. "I'm made of glass and I'm going to shatter," she thought, dazed. He pulled back only slightly with painful control, clutching the damp earth like a warrior battling himself. He wanted to prolong the moment, to carve it into eternity. He wanted her to feel desired beyond time, beyond any other man. At least this, he told himself, at least let her remember me for this, if I must vanish by dawn. Aeryn, still trembling, looked at him with such transparent surrender that Talorcan felt his soul fracture. She didn't hide her hunger or her vulnerability, as if she knew this moment was more than passion, it was legacy, it was fate. She asked him to go on, without hesitation, with a raw honesty that disarmed him. No woman had ever said that to him. None had ever spoken with such truth. This wasn't lust, it was naked courage. Then he understood. She had chosen him. Not because he was safe, not even because he was real, but because she had felt in him a calling that transcended time. He knew she was a virgin, and the revelation shook him. How could a woman so free, so fiery have remained untouched? Where had the men of her time been?
But she hadn't waited for another.
She had waited for him. And that was a gift. A nobler man might have stepped away. But Talorcan knew Aeryn pulled him beyond any code of honor. She was his spell. If that night was all fate would grant them, then he would give her everything. He would offer her pleasure, care, devotion. He swore to protect her, to bring her joy, even if he himself vanished like a shadow at first light. When she asked him to cross that threshold, he did. Not with violence, but with fervor. And she received him, not without pain but with fierce bravery, almost as if that act of surrender were also a declaration of life, a claim to power. They met there, where words disappear and only shared trembling remains. They loved each other with an ancient urgency, as if trying to fuse into one to defy time and its shadows. Talorcan worshipped her with an intensity that broke him. He felt her in every heartbeat, every breath. He moved within her as if trying to reach beyond flesh, to touch the very edge of the eternal. He called her his moon goddess, his brave fire, and whispered in the language of his ancestors words only a soul could understand. When their bodies reached climax, it wasn't just physical, it was a spiritual roar, a pact sealed in gasps and tears. Aeryn, trembling and radiant, caressed his back as he let go, speaking truths that were sincere, profound, almost sacred. She felt whole, as if she finally fully inhabited her own body. He spoke to her gently, fearing he'd hurt her. She laughed, between pain and gratitude, and in her final jest lingered a greater truth: they had found each other. Not by chance but by design. And though the future remained uncertain, that night would bind them forever in the memory of time. She had given him what she had never offered any other man. She didn't say it with words, but her surrender had been unmistakable, not from impulse but from sacred choice. And he, though he waited for some declaration to confirm what his heart already sensed, found in her gestures, in the gentle trace of her fingers drawing circles on his chest, a tenderness so pure it dissolved every doubt. He needed no proof. Aeryn Morwyn was not a woman of empty gestures. Her surrender was an act of honor, and he received it as such, not just with his body but with his soul. She had chosen him across all time, as if fate itself had folded to her will to bring her to him. Talorcan understood deep in his core, she was the one. And if 5 centuries had to pass to find her, every lonely night, every battle fought, every secret fiercely guarded by his bloodline had been worth it. He couldn't be sure that everything would go well that night. The risk hung over them like a sleeping blade. If he didn't survive, if the spell failed and his soul dissolved in the stream of time, he knew that his other self, the one who had yet to live this surrender, would recognize her too. Aeryn would not go unnoticed. Even if he didn't remember yet, her essence would still call to him. Because she had given him a gift so precious, that he couldn't answer with less. His only possible tribute was the oldest in his lineage, the druidic oath. He took her right hand and placed it over his heart. He covered their joined hands with his own, and held them with solemnity. Then, looking into her eyes with the depth of the ancients, he spoke in a grave voice woven of echoes and silence. If something must be lost, let it be my honor for yours. If one must be forsaken, let it be my soul for yours. If death must come soon, let it be my life for yours. And at the end, in a whisper charged with fate, I am given. The invisible bond sealed instantly, like a root sinking into the earth forever. A druidic tie, as old as the stones of his clan, bound him to her for eternity. From that moment on, there would be no place in the world where he could not feel her. If he walked into a crowd, his soul would seek hers. If he crossed a border, he would know if she was near. And in that irrevocable connection, something within him trembled. The intensity of what he felt overflowed him. She became even more beautiful in his eyes, because now she was part of his being. Aeryn looked at him, startled, with a mix of awe and something like reverent fear. What was that?" she asked in a hesitant whisper, with a nervous laugh that couldn't hide the shiver in her voice. Her ears had caught the layered resonance of the spell, like a distant thunder that doesn't threaten but warns. It had felt as if many ancient voices had spoken through him, touching her without touching. Talorcan gave a faint, almost sorrowful smile. "It's one of those things that becomes clear with time," he answered calmly. "A promise, or more than that. It's the certainty that I'll protect you if danger ever comes. But also, that I already belong to you. Forever. Whether you want me or not." He had staked everything, and he knew it. If she didn't speak the echo of the spell, and return the words, he would remain eternally bound to someone who might never return his love with the same fullness. And still, he had done it. Because for Talorcan MacRhean, honor stood above fear. She had to choose freely. Only then would the bond be reciprocal, and the power of the union multiply 1,000-fold. He would live with that hope. Aeryn's eyes widened as she felt the renewed heat stirring inside her. Again. "Does it hurt?" he asked tenderly without a hint of mockery. She raised an eyebrow with playful fierceness. "I told you. I'm much stronger than you think." Her words were followed by the bold stroke of her tongue across his lower lip. He groaned, defeated, and sealed her mouth with his. "Then yes, my girl, once more and again," he whispered, as he slid into her with the softness of a river returning to its ancestral course. "We were raised to endure." And because he knew she was a skeptic, that she needed more than promises and demanded proof, he said nothing else. It was his body that continued the oath, telling her again and again what words could barely contain, that she was his, that he loved her, that there would be no other life but the one by her side. Chapter 10. The Heartbeat of Silent Lake. March 22nd, just before midnight. Aeryn's body rested on Talorcan's, like a surrendered sigh. Her fingers moved slowly along the curve of his back, an unconscious gesture of belonging. The heat of their skin still pulsed between them, a silent testimony to the right that had bound them. What she felt wasn't merely desire, it was a deep, almost spiritual fulfillment. Something in her had changed, as if an ancient emptiness had been filled with a silent promise. For the first time in her life, Aeryn Morwyn felt truly loved. Not adored as a body, nor idealized as an idea, but honored as a soul. The fullness she now carried within was serene, ancestral. A strange and powerful peace pulsed in her belly, and her heart seemed to have found its place in the vast symphony of the universe. Yet even for a transformed woman, breathing under the weight of that warrior was no easy feat. With a gentle smile, she nudged him softly with her elbow and he rolled onto his back. Aeryn straddled him, with the ease of someone who had crossed an invisible threshold. Like the day she'd first found him, but this time naked, in intimate equality. She wanted to make love to him in every way possible, in every time possible. "Talorcan," she whispered, gazing at his face bathed in moonlight. He was beautiful. And in his blue eyes, drenched in silver light, burned an ancient tenderness. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely more than a thought. He had made her first time not just an act of passion, but a sacred rite. And if, for some reason, they never came together like this again, she knew he would be the measure by which she judged all the men in the world. Talorcan raised his large warm hands to frame her face, and pulled her into a hungry kiss. "Don't thank me," he murmured. "Ask me for more. That's the highest praise a man can receive. That the woman desires him, the way you desire me." Aeryn smiled, but the smile dissolved in the air. Suddenly Talorcan tensed. The passion in his gaze was replaced by urgent dread as he looked to the sky. The shift was brutal. "By Brigid's flame. It's nearly too late." He rolled out from under her with the speed of a trained warrior, stood, grabbed his plaid, and ran to the stone slab. "Look," he commanded without turning back. Aeryn followed him with her eyes still dazed, still adrift in the erotic haze of awakening. She sat up clumsily.
"It's almost midnight," he repeated.
"Look." She reached for her clothes, but Talorcan stopped her.
"There's no time. But you must take your pack."
"Aeryn, the satchel." She stared at him, puzzled, naked except for the watch and the strap of her backpack. The scientist in her burned with curiosity. What exactly was he planning? Love could wait. Talorcan worked quickly, painting symbols on the slab in swift strokes. He glanced at them again and again, murmuring in a tongue older than the stones. "Take my hand," he ordered. She obeyed, letting her skin merge with his. Talorcan looked at the markings, closed his eyes and whispered, "I ask Emergen that they be the right ones. Stay close to me, Aeryn. Here." She tried to glimpse the symbols, but he stepped in front of her, blocking her view.
"What do you think is going to happen, Talorcan?" she asked, watching the seconds tick by on her watch with a metallic rhythm.
He hesitated. Looked at her. "Aeryn, He stopped. And in that instant she knew. What burned between them wasn't only desire. It was something vaster, more eternal. And if he felt it too, then it was real, real as any equation. "I wish I had an eternity," he said, with a sadness that made her chest ache. She squeezed his hand, silently encouraging him. The clock counted down the last seconds. 1, 2, 3. "You are glorious, Aeryn," he whispered, tracing her cheek with a trembling finger.
"You have a brave heart."
5, 6, 7. "Do I matter to you, even a little?" She nodded, mute, her throat tight with emotion. 9. "My faith in you will have to be enough," he said. "Would you help me, if I were in danger?" "Of course," she replied without hesitation. "I would give my life for you," he said simply. "Whatever happens, promise me you won't fear me. I'm a good man, Aeryn. I swear it." She stroked his jaw. "I know. I don't fear you, Talorcan MacRhean." "Things might change," he warned. "I might change."
"That won't change this," she said. "Nothing could make me fear you."
12. "I wish I could be sure," he said, his eyes darker than the night. 13. Was there a 13? Then he screamed. He pulled her to him with desperate force and kissed her with his whole soul. And the world, as Aeryn knew it, began to unravel. It spun not inward, not outward, but in all directions at once, suspended in a vortex that was neither air nor light. Time frayed. Space lost its edges. She was coming apart, literally, in Talorcan's arms. She saw her backpack slip from her shoulder and float. She saw his hands reaching for her, but at an angle that didn't belong to this world. And then the explosion. Or rather, the certainty that there had been one. Her body didn't move, yet it felt as if a terrible force dragged her from within. Her mind reached for logic, the speed of light, the speed of sound. A cat always lands on its feet. White engulfed her. Everything was light, formless, weightless. Her body wasn't hers. Her skin no longer contained her. She was becoming something else. Something more. And then, as if the world slammed her back with brutal force, darkness crashed over her like a wall. The storm lashed her without mercy. Hail. Wind. Shattered branches. Pain. Cold. Confusion. "Talorcan," she screamed. "Here, girl," he called, stumbling toward her, his skin pale, his face aged by the effort. He stared at his own hands in horror. Aeryn mirrored him.
But what he saw she could not.
To her, his hands were fog.
"I made a mistake,"
Talorcan shouted, his voice raw. "I went too far. I thought I could go with you, but I can't. Forgive me, Aeryn."
"This wasn't supposed to happen." "What?" She could barely hear him. The wind stole her breath. The hail struck her. Pain multiplied. She moved toward him, touched him. His arm dissolved beneath her fingers like smoke. She tried to hold on. "What are you saying?"
Aeryn cried. "Save me," he roared. "Save my clan. Preserve the tradition." And then she understood. She wasn't just a woman lost in time. She was the heir to a druidic legacy. The guardian of a bloodline. And he was being left behind. He felt torn, as if part of his soul had been trapped in another time. He was trying to speak to himself, his past self, reason with him, guide him, but it wasn't working. He could barely move his lips, barely form words. He was split, present in two places at once, wavering between dimensions, finally grasping the magnitude of it all, struggling to tell him what had to be done. He had to tell him how to use the spell, the very one he'd once taught him.
"What are you talking about?"
Aeryn shouted, just before a chunk of hail shattered at her feet. "Ow!" He didn't answer. He only trembled in a way that terrified her, as if he were dissolving into the air, fighting not to be torn from the world. Aeryn tried to hold on to him, but he slipped through her fingers like mist. His eyes glinted like glacial glass in the dark. He had turned wild, unreachable, like an ancient sorcerer risen from the annals of the earth. He held out his plaid to her, begging without words for her to take it. She gripped it with trembling hands.
"Listen," he shouted.
His gaze locked onto hers for a moment, burning with passion, then lifted toward something only he could hear, beyond her, as if seeing something forbidden to mortal eyes. His lips moved one last time. "When you see him, tell him. Show him."
"What?"
"Tell what to who?" Aeryn cried, drenched in rain and wind-torn branches. A low branch forced her to duck, losing part of whatever he had tried to convey. "Tell and show who what?" And then suddenly, he vanished. As completely as the symbols that had faded from his chest in the cave. With his departure, the vortex died. The storm ended. Night fell with an otherworldly silence. And the mist dissolved like a last bitter sigh. Aeryn was left frozen, bruised, her skin raw from the wind, aching in both body and soul. She didn't even trust her legs, those legs that just moments ago had barely felt like her own. She felt divided, displaced. Her mind was chaos, as if the scientist within her still wandered frantically, lab coat flapping, protesting in a shrill, confused voice. Nothing responded to her will. "Talorcan," she murmured. "Talorcan." Silence answered, terrible and absolute. Shivering, she suddenly remembered she was naked. She clumsily wrapped herself in the plaid, and crawled toward where she thought the fire had been.
But not a single ember remained.
The storm had devoured it all. She collapsed to her knees on the frozen ground, curling into the tartan, trying to reclaim the lost warmth. She looked around, stunned. The hail had fallen so heavily that the hilltop looked like a crystallized world. It would take hours for it to melt under spring's timid breath. Then she stopped thinking about the storm. She relived each moment in her mind, replaying it with brutal clarity. At last, she saw the pattern. He had told her he would prove his truth, but only within the stones. And that if she still didn't believe him, he would be free. Free to leave. Only now did she understand what those words had meant.
"You left me," she whispered.
"And you really did, didn't you? What an irrefutable proof." He had begged her to guide him to her time, had loved her with shattering intensity, had given her the truth, and then returned to his own. Without offering to take her with him. Would he have, if she'd asked? Yes, she answered without hesitation. For love, she would have crossed any century. And this time, The scientific part of her found no argument at all. Aeryn wept. She felt aged by grief, filled with regret for not having treasured what she'd held in her hands. She didn't know how long she stayed like that, reliving every kiss, every caress, every look. Remembering him making love to her made the pain sharper. She saw it all now with different eyes. When she finally stood, she was trembling. Her knees were frozen, her feet numb. "I feel you, MacRhean, you taught me that," she murmured bitterly. "I hope you're proud of wounding me, by showing me I have a heart." She searched the shadows for her clothes. Her boots were gone. So was her backpack, her flashlight. Panic crept in. Had the storm taken everything? Terror gripped her. How could she go on, knowing the man she loved had been dead for centuries? She looked around, disoriented, and lifted her eyes. And she saw it. Where there had been nothing before, a castle now rose. Massive, austere yet majestic. Built of grey stone with towers that speared the sky. A central tower dominated the structure, flanked by round turrets. Broad wings stretched to the east and west. A milky mist curled around the battlements. Aeryn froze, breathless. What if she hadn't lost him after all? Her heart thundered in her chest with overwhelming force. She bolted from the stone circle, and ran across a yard of packed earth. Paths diverged, but one led straight to the castle stairs. She turned slowly on the spot. She noticed, like a distant echo, that the hail had only fallen within the circle. Beyond it, the ground was dry. Warm. Then she remembered. Talorcan had told her that in his century, the stones of Brathren stood within the perimeter wall of his estate. But before that, they stood alone in a plain. And now, they were enclosed in a fortress. She looked up. The sky was thick black, without a single city light on the horizon. The night before, from her rental car, she had complained that the lights from Clinmore ruined the view of the stars. She turned to the castle, that hadn't been there minutes ago. She touched the plaid he'd given her. And suddenly, the words he'd shouted before vanishing rang clear in her memory. "I've gone too far. I thought you could come with me, but you can't. Save my clan." "Dear God, Talorcan," Aeryn whispered, frozen. "You didn't restart in your time, you sent me back to save you. When I consider the brief span in which my life unfolds, lost in the eternity of all time, or the tiny space I occupy, swallowed by the infinite unknown, I am overwhelmed at being here, now." Blaise Pascal. For those of us who believe in physics, the distinction between past, present and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. Albert Einstein. Chapter 11. January 19, 1472. I still sing to the stars that watched you leave. I still leave bread and salt on the hollow stone. Because druidic love does not die, it transforms. Like the yew. Like the hawk. Like the soul. The dream was no dream at all. It was a dark, viscous chamber of the soul, a shadowed threshold that opened beyond the limits of the human. Talorcan MacRhean, still caught in the veils of lethargy, recognized that taste in the air, the unmistakable corrupt essence of death. It wasn't just a vision summoned by imagination, or the ancient druidic knowledge flowing in his blood. It was something darker. More real. A spasm ran through him, as faceless shadows tempted him from the edges of his awareness. Something was pulling at him, an entity that was neither flesh nor spirit, but a profane echo daring to inhabit his being. And then he knew. He was not alone in his own body. "I'm possessed," he thought with fierce clarity, resisting with the strength of generations of ancestors who had guarded secrets and ancient magic. What was inside him wasn't just any demon. It was himself. Another him. Another Talorcan, identical yet different, filled with desperation and memory, with the gaze of someone who had lived too much in too little time. A reflection begging not to be denied. "Get out!" roared the present Talorcan, the Celtic warrior, the druid of flesh and iron will. "I won't listen to your lies, deceitful spirit." But the other did not back away. He spoke with a blend of urgency and tenderness, with words that seemed to rise from ancient songs once learned beneath the skies of old Scotland. In the midst of the mental battle, a scent emerged. Pure, warm, feminine. An impossible fragrance that pierced the boundaries of time. Aeryn. Her skin, her voice, her light. The memory weakened him for an instant, and his other self drew closer. Talorcan rallied with fury, imposing his ancestral will. But in the eyes of the other he saw no malice, only a pain so deep it nearly split him in two. He looked at him with pleading. Not an enemy, but a brother. Himself torn by time. You fight me as if I were death, the reflection whispered with trembling lips. But I'm not a spawn of darkness. I only want to live. Let me exist. Let us be one. Never. Talorcan growled, striking with his spirit, rejecting the merging. The other faded like mist on the wind, then reformed again, unsteady. You're in grave danger, murmured the shadow, but Talorcan refused to listen. Before vanishing completely, the reflection turned its face toward some invisible place and shouted something Talorcan couldn't understand, instructions, verses, keys, words meant for someone beyond the threshold of the dream. Words sealed with desperation and legacy. Love, was the last thing the copy said before vanishing into the void. Then silence returned. But it wasn't peace. It was a prelude. Talorcan awoke as if emerging from the black waters of the other world, gasping, with scorched lungs and a wounded soul. He clawed at his own throat, beat his chest with his fists, and only then managed to draw a breath. He was drenched in sweat, caught in feverish chills and the torn remnants of furs that once covered his bed. His head throbbed with druidic violence, as if the ancestral memory of the MacRhean lineage echoed through him. Groping blindly, he searched for the wine jug, and when he found it, he drank until it was empty, as though the liquid could quiet the storm within his spirit. His heart pounded in his chest like a war drum, and a feeling of invasion and loss of self gripped him. Someone had tried to nest within him, to claim what was not theirs. He rose and began to pace, restless, crossing his chamber with uneven steps. He looked toward the bed as if expecting to find a trace, a shadow, a presence. But only the echo of the dream remained. A dream full of omens and magic, of battle with himself, of warnings broken by pride. Then a flash through the window caught his eye. A distant thunder rumbled like the voice of an ancient god. Talorcan pulled the tapestry aside and stood for a long time, gazing out at the Highland night, searching in the stillness for the calm slipping through his fingers. He buried the dream deep within, as men marked by a legacy they do not fully understand must do, but are bound to protect. And the night became silence once more. Chapter 12. We made no promises. We only watched the fire. While the brambles bloomed. As if the world would never hurt. Meanwhile, Aeryn moved like a spectre through the mist, her mind hazy and her body still trembling from the whirlwind of time, desire, and magic. Her intellect, once sharp, scientific, logical, now felt like a dull tool, useless against the vastness of what she was living. Reality slipped through her fingers, a medieval castle where no castle should be, a sky without a city, a love that might no longer exist. She stopped at the wall and peered through a crack in the stone, searching for the outlines of Clinmore. Nothing. Confirmed she had gone too far back. Her chest tightened. The Talorcan she had known might have been erased. Perhaps the universe, in its sacred balance, would not allow two versions of the same soul to coexist. And yet he had to exist there. The same man, but one who didn't know her, who carried no memory of their love. That thought shattered her. To see him and not be recognized. To feel him near and still be a stranger. But she remembered his words, "Promise me you won't fear me." Fear him? Never. Save my clan. She couldn't fail him. With renewed determination, she crossed the circle of stones once more and ran toward the castle. She pounded on the door with her fist, then her shoulder, then the full weight of her body. She screamed. She pleaded. Again and again. But no one came. She looked around, found a log, and hurled it at the door with the strength of a promise made under the stars. "Please open," she begged. A drowsy voice finally answered. I'm coming, I'm coming. I heard you the first time, impatient creature. The sound of ancient bolts made her hold her breath. And when the heavy door opened, she collapsed to her knees from sheer relief. A woman with sun-warmed skin and a shrewd gaze stood there. She wore a thick dress and a headpiece worn thin by years. It was Neria. Just as Talorcan had described her, strong, blunt, maternal, eternally young in the energy of her soul. Aeryn could hardly think. Her body, worn by the impossible journey, was beginning to give out. "Och lass," Neria murmured, cradling her with unexpected tenderness. "May Columba protect you. What are you doing wandering like this? Have you been harmed?" Aeryn, trembling in her arms, could barely stay conscious. She wanted to ask about Talorcan, to beg for the date, to be sure this wasn't a mirage from centuries past. But her thoughts were unraveling. A deep male voice came from within. "What's going on?" "Help me, Shannon," Neria called. "She's nearly frozen." Aeryn tried to speak. Only one word escaped her lips, with the strength of a prayer. "Talorcan." In her delirium she thought she saw Einstein himself bending over her, as though time with cruel irony had woven its final joke. He muttered something, and Neria protested. "That chamber is next to Talorcan's." "To hell with decency," the man replied. "It's the right place." And so Aeryn surrendered. She let herself be carried by the arms of fate, knowing only one thing for certain. Talorcan was alive. And she was finally near him. Chapter 13. The following morning. 100 steps above the heart of MacRhean fortress, where the wind seemed to speak with ancient spirits and the stones whispered secrets of the bloodline, Neria shoved open the heavy door of the tower with a huff. Her hip protested with a silent crack, and her words came out as a reprimand wrapped in affection. "Why must you live all the way up here, Shannon? You look like a bald eagle nesting at the mountain's peak," she said, letting the weight of her years slip into her tone without abandoning the humor that still sustained her. Shannon MacRhean looked up from an ancient tome, his eyes clouded with concentration. A cascade of silver-white hair framed his face with undeniable dignity, serene and powerful. Neria found him beautiful, in a distant, mature way, though she would never say such a thing aloud. "I'm not bald. I have more hair than it seems," he murmured, not quite leaving his reading, his fingers stroking the pages as if they held the breath of the gods. Neria sighed. The man seemed to live in another world, one made of ancient symbols and secret knowledge. How had such a man fathered children, she often wondered. Maybe his wife had dragged him to it, snapping books shut over his fingers with druidic fierceness. Not a bad tactic, she thought, shooting him a glance that never betrayed the feelings she'd kept hidden for 12 winters. "Here's your drink," she said, firmly placing a jug at the edge of his desk, careful not to let a single drop touch his manuscripts. "It's not another one of your vile brews, is it, Neria?" "No. This one is magnificent. And you need it. I won't leave until you drink. Does it have dandelion in it? You know we're nearly out." "Shannon," she replied with a stone-hard tone, "you can trust me." "You will drink it. Or I'll stay here till nightfall. And do you know your son is already awake? And what do you plan to do with the girl who showed up last night?" Shannon closed the tome, a slight tremor in his hands. He didn't dare look at her, afraid he might reveal something he'd long kept hidden. He reminded himself he would steal a glance once she turned away, as he had done for years. "How is she?" "Sleeping. But there doesn't seem to be lasting harm," Neria answered softly, the memory of that young woman still vivid, bloodied, voiceless, wrapped in a mystery as heavy as the stones of the keep. Neither Shannon nor she had overlooked the trail of her blood, or the strange tartan draped over her. "Did she say anything about what happened?" "Nothing that made sense," she muttered in her sleep, things broken by pain or fear. "I think," she added cautiously, "it's best not to press her. She needs refuge. Like I did that distant night. Let her tell her story when she's ready." Shannon stayed silent. Neria's words echoed deeper than they seemed. It was rare for her to mention that night. He had never asked what had happened to her. That had always been the MacRhean way. Intimacy was sacred, sometimes a blessing, often a curse. No one asked. And sometimes Neria had wished someone would. The distance between them, he thought, was ancient and necessary. And yet it hurt. Look through my wife's old clothes. Dress her properly, he ordered, breaking the moment with a brusqueness that barely hid the tenderness beneath. And drink. Don't take me for a fool. You've been weak lately. This brew will help. Stop pouring it down the privy. He blushed, just a little. Neria crossed her arms, defiant. Just a taste. One sip. What do you have to lose? Shannon raised a white brow in irony. Persistent woman. Stubborn old fox, she shot back. A faint, almost absent smile touched his lips. He lifted the jug, sniffed suspiciously and drank. Neria watched the movement of his throat as he swallowed, mesmerized. When their eyes met, she turned abruptly, hiding more than she showed. Don't forget the girl, she said stiffly. She needs to know she has a home here for as long as she needs it. I won't forget. Neria. She stopped. He hadn't called her that in years. Have you done something different with yourself? His voice was hesitant, almost shy. She didn't answer. Her heart pounded, traitorous. You look, a little more. He trailed off, cursing himself for starting. Neria turned with a serene face and pressed lips. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, his gaze drifting across her features. Had he truly noticed the small change? Or was he just being kind? More what? I don't know, maybe radiant is the word, softer somehow. Have you lost your mind? She snapped, retreating to the sharp edge of her character to shield herself from the tremor his words had caused. I look exactly the same. And with her back as straight as a wounded queen's, she walked out. But the moment she was out of sight, she ran down the stairs, skirts lifted, hair flying around her. She brushed the strands she'd trimmed that very morning, inspired by the mysterious young woman. Maybe she would sew that lapis blue linen dress she had considered long ago. And yes, she would. No doubt about it. Chapter 14. Your hands were stained with bark. And a gentle sadness. Like that of deer who scent the storm. And do not flee. Aeryn emerged slowly from the darkness of sleep, as if rising from the depths of a restless lake. Feverish visions had dragged her under, of locked doors, breathless chases, and her naked body heavy as lead, running after a face she couldn't reach, Talorcan. She took a deep breath, disoriented. She had left her life behind, the sterile routine of America, her soulless days, and thrown herself into a journey to Scotland in search of transformation. She wanted to lose her virginity, yes, but also to see if she still had a heart, and deep down to stir the stagnation of her existence. She had done it. All of it. More than she could have ever foreseen. Not just a lover, but a man marked by the arcane, a time traveler with a destiny woven into her own. And she had lost him. In just 3 days, Talorcan had awakened in her a tide of emotions she had never felt before. He had made her laugh, tremble, feel desired. He was intense without being overwhelming, passionate yet tender, with eyes that seemed to see beyond time. He had been perfect. And now, just as suddenly as he appeared, he was gone. She opened her eyes. The dimness shimmered gold with the flickering light of a fire. She was wrapped in a bed that felt pulled from an ancient dream, a forest green canopy with sheer curtains, a dark jade velvet quilt, silver-threaded pillows, soft furs beneath her feet. Everything was dark jade green. She smiled faintly, remembering Talorcan's eccentric taste for the color. There was no doubt, she was in his world. The room was a living relic. Grey stone walls, a high smooth ceiling, furniture carefully carved from cherry wood, Celtic knots etched into the bed's frame. It was like living in a forgotten gallery, from another century. No electricity, no clocks, just oil lamps blackened with smoke, tapestries, rustic rugs, and a peat fire scenting the air with dry heather. Aeryn instinctively searched for her watch, It was gone. So were her clothes, her backpack. Everything had vanished in that impossible leap across centuries. She wore only a white chemise, long, soft, and so old-fashioned it bordered on theatrical. She shook her head in resignation, and slid her legs over the edge of the bed. The floor was ice-cold. She crossed the room and pulled aside the tapestry from the window. A clear sun bathed the castle's inner courtyards. Below, women beat rugs, children played ball, and geese marched like noisy little armies. She watched the scene, torn between fascination and horror, remembering that according to Taran, medieval children played with inflated animal bladders. She had to move. Verify the date. Find Talorcan. She was about to wrap herself in the quilt like a toga, when her eyes landed on a lavender dress carefully laid out on a chair. Beside it, other items, garments, ribbons, and embroidered overshirt. She dressed in haste. No, underwear. She groaned. She could already picture herself walking around with her butt flying loose under the linen, but she managed to improvise padding with torn silk to fill out the oversized slippers she slipped into. Then her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since the day before. But the urgency was something else. She had to find him. Tell him everything. She remembered the last words he had tried to say before vanishing into the stones. Tell him, show him. He wanted her to speak to his past self. To save him. To protect his clan. She sighed. If someone had shown up in her own century with a story like this, she would have sent them straight to a psychiatric ward. But Talorcan was different. He had to remember something, had to recognize her. Everything in his gaze had screamed truth. And she would find him. You'll see, Talorcan, she thought with sudden resolve. You don't know me yet. But one day you'll wake up in the 21st century. You'll fall in love with me. And you'll send me back to save you. With her heart pounding across centuries, she crammed on her shoes as best she could and ran out into the gallery, guided by a deep longing, an ancestral promise yet to be fulfilled. Chapter 15. The Omen in the Stone, and the Broken Dawn. Talorcan rarely slept after sunrise. It was unlike him to give in to idleness, but that night his rest had been disturbed by hazy dreams, dark as shadows creeping from the past. Upon waking, well into dawn, he struggled to discard those confused visions and clung instead to brighter thoughts, the imminent wedding, the murmur of voices filling the castle stone corridors once again, the cheerful footsteps of children, his children, running through the courtyards like the wind through the heather. He longed to have children. To teach them to read the sky like a sacred map, to fish in still waters, to hear the ancient voice of the forest in the rustle of leaves. He would do so with his sons, and with his daughters too, he promised himself. Because in the MacRheans, wisdom was not to belong only to the men. And this time, by all the spirits of Emergen, he would lead his bride to the altar. Even if he did not yet know who she truly was. She was young, of childbearing age, and he would treat her with honor and courtesy. Perhaps in time, she might even come to feel compassion for him. Maybe she was young enough to be shaped, like an untamed noble filly. Maybe she would want to learn to read. And if not, perhaps her vision was weak, and she would not perceive the eccentricities of those who dwelled in the Caer Thalanis castle. Ethne MacLear was his last chance. He knew it with the ancient certainty of those who have lost much, and cannot afford to fail once more. The Highlanders did not offer their secrets lightly, and after centuries of rumors and failed marriage alliances, few families agreed to give their daughters to men surrounded by dark legends. But Laird MacLear for land and gold had sealed the deal. Now all that remained was for Talorcan to conceal with enough skill the most unusual aspects of his lineage, the very ones that had made other brides flee shouting, sorcerer or pagan. Bah! He was a Christian of sincere faith. And also a druid. For Talorcan, there was no contradiction. God was the breath behind all creation, in the sparkle of lakes, in the precise geometry of a star, in the moss that embraced the stones. Every solved equation did not weaken his faith but expanded it. Lately, he found unexpected comfort in the masses celebrated by the new priest, Nevin Blaerwick, a young, wise, compassionate man not given to judgment. Raised by a mother who still revered ancient rites, Nevin looked beyond gossip and saw men for what they were, worthy if they lived with honor. In preparation for Ethne's arrival, Talorcan had taken measures. He had warned his brother Caelan, and his father Shannon to moderate their gestures and language. He hid the heretical tomes high in the tower, in a guarded chamber. The castle had to seem for at least a few weeks a respectable place. He would not repeat past mistakes. This time he would not fail. But that morning the castle breathed a different air, tense and foreboding. Talorcan woke hungry and puzzled by the absence of the cooks. He wandered the empty halls, calling for Neria, who finally appeared, but without her usual warmth. She served him hard bread, watered-down beer, and a meat pie whose contents he preferred not to know. Where he had expected golden herrings, crunchy turnips, and fried eggs, he found silence and coldness. Not even his faithful Cahill, the young druid apprentice, showed up to greet him. Then Shannon arrived, his father entering the hall with that distracted wise man's gait, head always ahead of the body as if dragging it along. He questioned him without preamble. "Where were you last night?" The conversation that followed had the tone of old disputes, veiled sarcasm, family reproaches, and the eternal contrast between the young warrior and the old philosopher. But the world seemed twisted that morning, as if the foundations of reality had shifted slightly during the night. Shannon finally revealed the source of his concern. "A girl appeared on our staircase. Naked, wrapped in your ceremonial plaid, the one woven with silver threads. Fainted. Maiden's blood between her thighs. An English woman." Talorcan froze. "An English woman? Here. With my plaid?" "She said your name before losing consciousness," his father added gravely. "And Selen, the priest's mother, sensed a darkness around you. The same one that now seems to have crossed our threshold." They argued. They accused each other of stubbornness, superstition, interference. But in the midst of the quarrel, Shannon suddenly fell silent. His gaze drifted, as if something or someone had just entered the room. Talorcan felt it too. A change in the air, a tingling at the nape of his neck. The omen was taking shape. And in that suspended moment, they both knew that fate had just taken form. The story about to begin was already walking among them.